I'm Mark Seifter.
And I'm Linda Zayas Palmer.
And this is Arcane Mark.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome.
And welcome to our biased reaction to Secrets of Magic.
That's right.
We are going to be picking up where we left off. It's a little bit of a funky where we left off because we did chapter 1 and then we did full-on class chats for the Magus and Summoner classes. So there's just a little bit of chapter 2 that we've got to dive into here before we spend the far majority of our episode today on the spells chapter.
That's right. So it's this class intro. So you have a little icon that talks a little bit about the class, and then the iconic for both of the two iconics, Saltiel and Ija. Then there is also a section that discusses the similarity between Summoner and Magus, where they don't seem like they're very similar to each other, but the fact is that both of them deal with the idea of synergy or symbiosis between two disparate things. For the Summoner, the two things are actually two creatures connected by a life force. For the Magus, the things that are being blended are the martial skill and magical study of the Magus. So that's kind of like the little section that's there. All right.
Very cool.
Now let's skip immediately ahead all the way to the spells, where we will be forever. On page... Spells. So, we've got a cool picture here with Linny
fighting, it looks like a bunch of rocks.
Yep, and then has this, like, tree.
You don't want to fight rocks in large groups. They get more dangerous when they're
gonna do a dance of ruin. It's
yeah,
not
they
great.
are.
So there's an introduction here that talks about the fact that there is a grimoire, and it's sort of like in character. It's like, I've sent you this grimoire full of spells, but it has certain types of spells: cantrips, contingency spells, minion magic, that spells that involve your companion creatures, polymorph magic, summoning magic, time magic, variable incantations that use a different number of actions. It talks about each of them and how they can be interesting or useful, where it's like the magical researcher who sent the grimoire is like, variable actions are not really important for a magical researcher such as me, because what's the difference between 2 seconds, 4 seconds, and 6 seconds? I can just do the longer version. But if you're an adventuring mage and every second counts because you might be being murdered, then sure, it's good to be able to do a shorter version that can do something. Then there's also a section on the rune manifestations that just talks again about the magic runes that come out when you cast spells.
And how they're different from person to person, and how it varies based on tradition and what it means and all that kind of stuff.
Yep, and the spell lists.
Yes, indeed.
So going into the spell, as you can see, there are a lot of spells. Like the arcane spell list, which is always the most bloated out spell list, is over that entire spread only gets almost to the end of the 7th level spell, and it doesn't.
And continues
here with the rest of the arcane spells, and then you start with Divine, which is always the shortest. And it's got 2 prayers that are in there that are just like randomly there that I wrote in a sidebar because it didn't take like exactly the right amount of space.
So Shellen's, I see that that Shellen's got this graceful sonnet going on, and then Ravagog is basically just like, roar.
Yes, they're very different kinds of poetry that were used in between the 2 different prayers. Because Shellen's like, "Oh, Shellen, grace me now with all your arts, that I may bring your blessings each to each. Expose the beauty deep within our hearts, and show that love is never out of reach. Bloom now the rose of magic in my soul, and grant the strength and courage to prevail. For beauty, love, and peace shall be my goal, and by your hand I know I'll never fail. Exalted goddess, be with me today, your heart and mine entwined, for this I pray." Whereas Ravagog's call is, "Rough beast, come, devour all in your titanic maw. I am your claw, feed me with your rage. The desire to destroy, I am free, and you are caged, but not for long. Grant my prayers with blood." Yep. Ravagog.
That's the theme there. Very much like raw, destroy.
Yep, that's the Ravagog way. All
is
right.
the Ramagugwe.
So that is like sort of one of the things that was hiding in this spell list. But if you keep going, divine spells end on that page. Then there's the occult spell list, which is
that totally fits right there.
exactly 2 pages. Then there's the primal spell list, which is most of 2 pages, but also has some random notes from the Green Faith Council that I wrote to finish off those 2 pages. Where
I knew as soon as the representative from the Order of Storm revealed the trove of spells within the men here, there'd be a rush to claim the right of first experience. So it looks like this is a talk about the different orders of druids and the Green Faith Council discovering and claiming various spells.
That's right, because some of the Green Faith orders that are like the more animal orders, specifically in the lore about the Green Faith, they use trial by combat, and so they wanted to fight by combat to determine which spells they were going to use. Whereas the person who wrote the little snippet was from the Order of Waves. It was like we used logic with the Orders of Flame.
It was more civil, yes.
It was more civil. So that is the end of the spell list, which you don't expect necessarily is gonna have some sidebars with stuff in them, but this time it did. Moving on to the actual spells. More Linny with like a hobgoblin or something being attacked by all sorts of little animals and Drugami.
I guess, is that the, I take it that's going to be the animal allies spell that's on this spread, yes.
So here's what we've got. You've got an aberrant form, so you can turn into a Chul, Gogatath, or Otyug. Angel form, so you can turn into a Belize, Coral, Monadic, or Movanic Diva. The animal allies spell.
Where you summon a bunch of tiny ordinary animals from the environment to attack your foes.
They attack.
Yes.
The approximate spell, where you basically it's a cantrip and you approximate the number of something just pretty much instantly. I mean, obviously you still have to cast the spell, but within seconds, you're just like, oh yes, this has about 200 coins. The Ash Cloud spell, where you make a giant cloud of ash and smoke. Bandit's Doom, a spell where when somebody tries to attempts to take the target into their possession, they wind up taking mental damage and become doomed. Whoops.
Don't steal from someone with Bandit's Doom.
Befitting attire, an illusion that makes your clothing and worn items suitable for a particular occasion, and you can heighten it to get up to 100 creatures.
Oh wow!
To
so so like you can eat. So the first level versions, or not first level, but the original version is like, oh, that's a party, and then once you get to the higher levels, I guess it's really like an entire party.
Yep.
And the other meaning of the word, giant groups of people. Cool. Biting words.
Yes, it's an occult-only spell.
You taunt someone so hard that it hurts them.
Yes, for sonic damage. That's correct. Good. And basically, you attack with your words. It's for a minute, and basically, you can do up to 3 attacks with your words during that minute. And they deal biting sonic damage.
Blazing, is this Falcon Punch the spell?
Well,
Blazing Dive?
It's not. It's more like Falcon Kick.
Oh, okay.
As you fly straight up into the air, and then you fly in a straight line to an empty space.
Okay, but it's definitely Captain Falcon.
You make an explosion at that point.
Falcon Kick!
Blazing Fissure is you create a blazing fissure for bludgeoning and fire damage in a line. It is quite a blazing fissure. Blessing of Defiance is a 5th level spell where you quickly give a target a +4 status bonus to 1 type of saving throw for 1 action. For 2 actions, you can also give them an extra bonus depending on which type of saving throw you give them the +4 status bonus on. And for 3 actions, you give everybody in your party the +4 status bonus for that 1 round.
So if you know what kind of save is coming up,
Yep.
Like, let's say that a monster has some really obnoxious will save ability that they're using with an aura, and people are having to deal with it. Then you can be like, "Oh, hi."
Let's get temporarily immune this turn, everybody.
Yep.
With a +4 bonus. Alright, so then there's Blink Charge, which lets you charge and teleport Blink and then make a strike, dealing additional force damage. You even can deal some of the force damage on a failure. Blood Spray Curse, where you inflict a curse on the target that causes their wounds to gush out blood. Blood Boil, where you just make their blood up and boil by putting fire in there. And it deals a bunch of fire damage and potentially drains them because you boiled their blood. So they don't have as much anymore because it boiled off.
Yikes.
Bottomless Stomach, where you make an extra dimensional space inside of something's stomach.
Is this a goblin spell?
I mean, it's an extra dimensional spell.
No, I know, but it just seems very, very goblin thematic. Bottomless stomach.
Breadcrumbs, where you basically leave a glittering trail behind wherever you walked, and so you can tell where you've been before because of the glittering trail behind you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, that also means it's super easy for other things to kind of track you because there's literally a trail. Though
yes,
you don't know what direction.
Yeah, it's target one willing creature. So
yes.
you if you've got breadcrumbs on you, you've decided, you know what, I'm worried that I'm gonna get lost in this forest or maze or whatever, and I'd like to make sure that I know where I'm going.
Breadcrumbs on Linda just in case.
Maybe you should. Maybe you should. I have a real talent for getting lost and going the wrong way.
Bullhorn amplifies your voice, making you louder, which can give you potentially a bonus when you were trying to coerce and make auditory performance checks at a large venue. You can be heard up to a mile away once it heightens high enough. That's pretty far. Burning Blossoms is an 8th level spell that creates an intangible hollow tree with fiery blossoms that deal fire damage.
Oh, it also fascinates.
Potentially fascinates you.
It makes you
move towards it. Then
shiny tree.
We get to start with the little journal Simone
there was
wrote
actually
about a witch.
There was actually an earlier journal.
Oh.
First Contact was on.
I missed it.
Was on this first spell description page.
I missed First Contact. It totally was there.
Yes.
Witch journal. First Contact. Which is like stay away from the forest, and then she saw a witch. It was like, well met, cousin, and then headed off. Whereas Initiation is where her familiar showed up, and because she had a job at the library, and a gust of wind scattered a stack of papers, and a blackbird trilled, and then she's like, wait, what now? Patron magic? I don't know what's going on. Because it is a witch who is slowly becoming initiated into the magic.
It's pretty cool telling the story throughout the spells chapter.
Canticle of Everlasting Grief. Conveys pure grief that deals mental damage, frightens, and means that they can't get circumstance or status bonuses. Potentially for 1 week.
Yikes.
That's on a failure. Actually, on a critical failure, they can't get circumstance.
Until the curse is broken at all. And with their targets, allies can't benefit from such bonuses within 15 feet of them.
That's right.
Wow.
It's the Canticle of Everlasting Grief.
It messes them up pretty bad.
Cast into Time is where you use a wave of temporal energy to just send everything in a cone into time. And then
what does being sent into time mean? Like that they reappear again in the future?
That's one of the ones that when I was in that Twitter thread and I was talking about how time magic can sometimes be really problematic and sometimes it can be something that's easy to adjudicate but still really feels like time magic. Like, use this as an example of a spell that Jessica Catalan wrote that feels like time magic but you can run it at your table no problem. What happens is you send them into time. It feels like they might have been in time for days or minutes or it's variable. But they reappear again instantly at the end of your turn, which is almost instantly. being stuck in time and bashed against objects from different times, like, you know, those trippy things that you sometimes see on TV where, like, there's clocks and
They're
all,
like swirling
or
colors,
like the
and
Pyramid of Giza, and you
Yeah,
bump
yeah.
into all of them. Deals mental and bludgeoning damage to them. They also can get sickened by the temporal distortion, which is much worse than jet lag, and then they reappear in the space where they were. So it's actually very easy to adjudicate it, while it still carries a lot of time-based flavor. And I mentioned when I was talking about it, is like you can imagine that there you could have a very similar spell that was like a wave of sewage that is a 15-foot cone that sickens things and deals damage. I mean, it probably wouldn't do mental damage, but whatever. But that this spell manages to get a very time-based
theme
feel
to the
to it.
mechanics.
And also the fact that they pop back at the end of your turn usually isn't relevant, but it could be, and it shows that they were traveling through time. So chromatic armor is going to make an armor that has 2 different colors that are randomly determined, and those colors are going to protect you against a particular energy type / non-energy type.
You can spend a third action on this to get a third color.
You can, if you want 3 colors. And also, when a creature adjacent to you tries to attack you, or whoever has the spell up, they might become dazzled, and then they become temporarily immune. And if the armor could become color matching the type of damage that you took most recently, if you roll 8.
Is there like some other color thing going on in this book? Because I'm noticing there's 3 chromatic spells.
Well, I mean, there's several chromatic spells in the core, so
fair enough.
Chromatic image, which is like mirror images, except for that they're chromatic, and so therefore they can do some damage when somebody pops them. Then there is
so you pretty easily construct somebody who's like, my theme is that I'm a color mage.
Yep. Then there's chromatic ray, which shoots out a ray that deals a bunch of damage based on what color of ray you got. Can potentially also give you some pretty powerful effects if you have the 6th level chromatic ray. Then there's claim curse, where you kind of claim a curse from the target, and briefly you get the curse, and they do not get the curse. But then they get it back.
Yes. You can offer them temporary reprieve from a curse that is a lot worse for them than it is for you.
There's clone companion, where you create another copy of your companion, and your companion and the duplicate.
Oh, I see. Every time you command your companion, both the companion and the duplicate get actions, and they use the same actions in the same order.
Correct. That's right. So it's a companion, which means animal companion, familiar, and future types of companions, such as construct companions, but not eidolons. And you do have to sustain the spell, so it's not like it's giving you massive action economy on the companion there. But if you have effortless concentration, you can sustain it easily, and then you can still do one command to get both sets of companions or both the set of 2 companions to do things.
Yeah, and speaking of what is a companion, there's a sidebar here that
yep,
companion.
That's what I was reading from.
Yeah, refers to animal companions, familiars, and future types of companions, but not eidolons.
That's true.
Yep.
Then there's Concordant Choir, which is a spell that is variable action that can either deal Fortitude save sonic damage to one target, or 2d4 sonic damage to a 10-foot burst, or 2d4 sonic damage to a 30-foot emanation. And it increases by 1d4 for the one-person version and 2d4 for the other versions each time you heighten it. Then there's Coral Eruption, which
cause razor-sharp coral to erupt from the ground, turning it into a dangerous coral reef.
Corrosive body. It's like fiery body,
you
but
get,
it's
you get
acid.
Oh, I see. You get more coral if you put coral underwater as opposed
That's right, because it's coral.
Makes sense.
Corrosive body is an acidic fiery body, and here we have a picture of cosmic form. I am cosmic, says Kyra. Speaking of which, cosmic form turns you into moon or sun form.
Guess which one Kyra picked?
Moon. Oh, I
guessed
got
incorrect.
wrong. Sun.
Hooray!
Okay.
You win the Saren Ray Award.
The next witch story is Familiarity.
Is that about a familiar?
It is. Which is the familiar was nicknamed Salty Bird. And got an herb garden and is settling into her life as a witch.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's Daemon form.
Better to read the whole thing, of course.
You could turn into a Sustodaemon, Leucodaemon, Meladaemon, or Piscodaemon. Days wait, where you fast forward time for a single creature and it gets all the aches and pains of standing in place for an entire day, which can temporarily potentially make it fatigued and enfeebled.
Deity's Strike. Manifested version of your deity's favorite weapon appears. And after the attack, divine energy bursts forward in a shockwave.
Yep, so like if you're Gorham, like a giant Gorham greatsword just comes out and is like, Grah!
So like compared to spiritual weapon is more like a continuous smack, and this is more of like a huge thwack and then explosion. So if you want something that's just gonna go pop in
the heavens open up and
yes.
A giant sword comes out and it blows up.
Yep. I can see definitely this being a Gorham spell.
Yep. Demon form, you turn yourself into a demon, such as Babao, Hezru, Nabasu, or Vrak. By such
form.
As, I mean those are the only choices.
You could turn yourself into a Barbazu, or an Oceluth, or let's see, that's
an Aranis and a Sarglagon.
A Sarglagon, yes.
Yep. That's right. You can turn yourself into any of those.
There's a lot of spells like this that in this book that are turn yourself into a blank.
Polymorph spells. That's why the intro said there are a lot of polymorph spells.
Mm-hmm.
Distracting chatter is so many distracting auditory illusions that it just makes it hard for them to deal with things. They wind up being flat-footed, have problems with perception checks that are auditory, and problems with like trying to chant out their spells due to the fact that, like, you try casting a spell when people are bombarding you with other streams of voice things. It would probably be super effective against Linda.
Yep.
Divine Armageddon. Creates a divine cataclysm from your deity.
Deals negative damage and alignment damage of your... Except for if it's harmed by positive damage,
then it takes positive damage.
So it's basically just a divine cataclysm that zaps down and is going to hurt everything living
in a 60-foot burst.
Yes.
In fact, it's a range 120 feet, 60-foot burst. So you can make sure that it doesn't burst you, but you're going to have to be pretty careful about all the things that you hit. Draw Ire. Deals mental damage to a creature, and it takes a penalty to attack creatures other than you because you are goading it to attack you.
The aggro spell.
Draw the Lightning calls lightning from the air down into you, which damages your opponent, and then it goes into your weapon, and then you smack them with lightning.
Legit. Echoing weapon. Let's see. Every time you strike a blow, the impact absorbed into the weapon. If a creature is wielding the weapon at the end of its turn, the weapon discharges a burst of sound.
Yes. And the sound can deal 1 damage per hit, sonic damage per hit at the end of the turn, up to 4 if you hit 4 times. So it can potentially deal 4 damage each turn, which can be pretty handy. And of course, unlike magic weapon, it combines if you have a +1 striking weapon, and you can get some extra sonic damage onto your target. Element Embodied is a 10th level spell that turns you into like an uber elemental of those particular kinds. Like the air elemental has a ridiculous a lot of them have
80-foot fly speed.
It's super fast.
Whose movement
it has
doesn't trigger reactions.
The aura is difficult terrain for flying creatures that don't have the air trait. You've got a long-reaching gust attack that can push your opponents, and a lightning lash.
Speaking of long reach, 80-foot range increment lightning lash.
Yes, it is a ranged attack. And then there's the earth one that
Creates difficult and hazardous
can
terrain.
burrow. It's
spike stones.
resistance 5 to physical. Difficult and hazardous terrain. They gain 40 temporary hit points instead of 30. Got a big bludgeoning fist and a rock that they can throw. It's not as ranged as the air elemental.
Fire's got a giant aura of flame that hurts anything that gets close to it.
Yep. One of the few things in the game that grants immunity. Immunity to fire. You get weakness to cold. Giant aura of flame. You've got your fire tendril with 25-foot reach and a fire moat with a 60-foot range. Then water elemental, which has resistance to fire, 80-foot swim. Water around you is difficult terrain for swimming creatures that don't have the water trait. You've got a wave that can push or pull, and a water spout that is shooting out water.
And one of the things about all these like polymorph spells is that while like, you know, any one given form might be like situational to a particular thing. Like you're not going to want to be a water elemental unless you're in the water. You can use the spell for any of them. So
yes.
So when you're in the air, you're an air elemental. When you're in the water, you're a water elemental, etc. You just pick whatever works best for your circumstances.
That's right. Elemental absorption, you pick an element, and you gain resistance to damage dealt by that element, and you can do it as a 2-action activity if you do, during the time to release the energy, in which case it deals damage based on the amount that you've stored up from protecting yourself. And at that point, the spell ends. Elemental Annihilation Wave, which is a variable action, but it starts from 2 actions. It can go up to 2 rounds of 3 actions each to be like fire and bludgeoning damage. And it's in a 30-foot cone always, but on the 3-action version also pushes things away and knocks them prone, and the 2-round version also is a 60-foot cone, and the elements linger in the cone, racing into the distance and making it difficult to approach like gust of wind. Elemental Confluence.
You summon sort of elemental forces of air, earth, fire, and water, and every turn you pick two of those forces to act. So the Confluence has its own hit points and such, and then it can lash out in different ways, or be more resistant, or deal persistent fire damage, or expel jets of water, and you just decide what powers you wanted to have on a turn-by-turn basis.
That's right.
There's a continuation of the witch's story with the first lesson here. That's would be good to check out.
Her bird Pepper, and she has the first lesson where some kind of a figure is in the lightning is like, I'm an emissary on your patron's behalf. Learn about the elements to aid you in your journey.
Speaking of learning about the elements,
Elemental Gift, which grants you a gift depending on which element. You can get air for a status bonus to your speed, and a fly speed equal to your speed before the status bonus. Earth, you can get a bonus against effects that were going to push you, and the ground near you is difficult terrain. Fire, where you can do some persistent fire damage, and water, where you gain resistance to fire and a swim speed.
And if you heighten this up, then instead of targeting 1 creature, you can target up to 5.
That's right. And Ija is over here casting some kind of Envenom Companion spell, I think. Let's see.
Yeah. Look at Tuku's fangs there. That's gonna be Envenom Companion.
So there's Elemental Zone.
And like a snake tongue.
Elemental Zone makes a zone of elements where that element is amplified with additional damage. Then in Venom Companion, you put some poison damage onto your companion or Eidolon.
If you like poison, you can also use Extract Poison to try to pull poison out of a creature, and then you can put it onto your weapon.
That's right. And then you can deal some poison damage. Fated Confrontation is a 10th level spell where you weave the threads of fate, and you're like, these 2 foes must have a climactic battle. You pick an ally, you pick an enemy. The ally can teleport to get closer to the enemy, and they're isolated for 1 round, during which fate refuses to allow either of them to be affected by anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And That also, for the duration of the spell, either fated opponent can manipulate fate once on each of its turns to let them either roll twice to take the higher on an attack roll or skill check against the fated opponent, or force the fated opponent to roll twice on a saving throw against one of its abilities and take the lower result. And if either target comes unable to act or they both agree to cease hostilities, the spell ends.
Yes, target one willing ally and one enemy. So if you pick your ally who is best suited to defeat said enemy does not get to decide that it can't affect anything except for that one ally that's very good against it.
That's right. So, you can absolutely do that. You can also pick an ally who you think can hold off a big, like the big boss. A big boss is like area based.
Yeah,
it can't affect you for one round.
Else. Like, oh yeah, so, this creates like giant reflex save areas. Well, let's have the person with improved evasion and ridiculous reflex saves be the only one who has to deal with the reflex save
for the next round, and then during that round, the rest of your team can try to mop up all the other things in the encounter. And then when that round ends, your person who was tanking that single opponent for the round still gets the opponent and that person still get the double.
Yeah, I'm noticing it says duration 1 minute in the top part.
Yes, but the part where they're cut off for each other is only the first round of the minute. But the thing where they can force them to roll twice lasts for the whole minute.
Longer.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, it makes sense.
Feral Shades summons a weave of gray mist of negative energy that has shades in the shape of predatory animals that slash and deal negative damage. And it's better against prone creatures. Fey form turns you into a Fey battle form of a Dryad, Elenanx, Naiad, Redcap, or Unicorn.
That's a lot of choices.
Yep. Flame Vortex is like an inferno with fiery air currents in it. Flame Wisp does a little wisp every time you strike a creature. One of the wisps comes out and deals some fire damage, and when you cast fire spells,
like the little tiny elementals.
Yeah, but when you cast fire spells, you can get a wisp back. So it basically does 3d4 fire damage, except for that if you cast more fire spells, it can do more than 3d4 fire damage.
Legit. Speaking of fire,
flammable fumes. Invisible gases that have an acrid toxic smell that do poison damage, and at one point you can burn them with fire and then it explodes.
Flowing Strike causes a wave of flowing water to rush behind you like an elegant river that lets you stride a huge distance without triggering reactions and strike at any point during that.
Yes.
So travel along the water.
Your strike adds bludgeoning damage and
hit harder and push them, and it's very versatile for mobility.
That's right. Forceful Hand is a disembodied hand that is gonna try to like shield you against attacks by giving you some cover. If you use a manipulate or attack, you get lesser cover. If you don't, but you only use a move, you get standard cover. And if you've only used a concentrate action, which you have to sustain the spell, you get greater cover. But that means you have to have not moved, not cast a spell with manipulate, not done any attacks.
But this spell gets a lot of other options as you heighten it. And it also gets more AC and hit points. If you heighten it to 6, then you can instead swat an enemy using your spell attack roll instead of athletics to push them out of the way. Heightened to 7th, you can grasp, have your hand try to grapple an enemy, instead using your spell attack roll instead of athletics for the result to grapple. If you heighten it to 8th, then it can punch an enemy for a bunch of force damage. And if you heighten it to 9th, it also has the ability to crush. If it doesn't have anyone already grabbed, it flies to that enemy and attempts to strike them with deadly crushing force. If it succeeds to strike, then it also grabs.
Yep.
And if it's already got them grabbed when it does use crush, then it uses constrict.
That's right.
Yes.
Plus, we go back to our witch friend.
For a bit of study abroad. That's
right. Studying abroad has a conviction of a crucial mission to accomplish. Time has continued onward. It's now 4687, so she's getting older as things go on. Cauldron skills have improved and has now gone abroad to try to learn more about things. Study with a scholar of the elemental planes.
Yes.
Frigid Flurry is you basically make a gust of wind that freezes the air's moisture into a flurry of jagged shards that picks you up and carries you to the other end of the area.
Gale Blast, as you probably guessed from its name, is a giant, is a blast of wind that whirls around you. Anybody who is next to you is going to take damage and be pushed back. It's not giant; it's a cantrip.
That's right.
The giant one was what I was what I had fallen to, which is the next one. Geyser, powerful geyser that blasts up from the ground. 10-foot radius, but 50 feet tall. Blasts people up, deals bludgeoning damage, throws them into the air, causes them to fall unless they've got some way to, and smack into the ground unless they've got some way to prevent that.
Yep. Glimmer of Charm creates a glittering aura that makes people have a better attitude towards you. Even if
that feels pretty anime to me, to be honest.
Yep.
You get like the sparkles around the character. It's like, oh.
It's so sparkly.
Yes, indeed.
Even if they succeed, their attitude improves towards you by one step. And if they critically fail, they become helpful to you. Gouging Claw is a cantrip that does a bunch of damage and can potentially deal persistent bleed damage. It's in melee.
Then we've got Gravitational Pull. You suddenly alter the flow of gravity to pull the target toward you. Might knock them prone too.
It's got a one-action version.
One action to target one creature. If you spend a second action, you can pull them farther. If you spend a third action, you can target up to 5.
That's right. Gravity Well is an area that pulls everything into the middle. It's from originally from Gods and Magic. Guiding Star, you kind of look up at the constellations and call on them to guide a creature to the location where you cast the spell. Every time they see the stars are like, hey, come to this chosen location. But they don't have to listen to it if they're like, stop pinging me, stars.
Haunting Hymn is another option for divine casters to deal damage with a cantrip.
And occult.
And occult, yes. Well, I know that people sometimes talk about, like, well, divine doesn't have as many ways to deal non-alignment damage. So this one was, like, a specific example.
Yeah, because divine has alignment damage, positive damage, negative damage already, and now it adds sonic damage, which is one of its other types of damage.
But it just wasn't at the cantrip level yet.
Yep.
So then you've got Healing Plaster. Purify some dirt and mud into plaster, which you can use instead of healer's tools to help with treating.
Cantrip.
Also a cantrip, and as it heightens, then you can then it can help out with those first aid and treat wounds.
Healing Well creates a well of healing energy that creatures can interact and tap into it to get some healing.
What is a Horizon Thunder Sphere? That's a really good name for a spell.
You gather magical energy into your palm, forming a concentrated ball of electricity that crackles and rumbles like impossibly distant thunder, and then you make a ranged spell attack with it. It's another one of those could be up to 2 rounds spells.
Yes.
It can do 30 feet for 2 actions, 60 feet
hold on. When you say up to 2 rounds, you can spend...
Yeah.
You can spend 3 actions casting the spell, and then don't finish it, and spend another 3 actions on your next turn.
Just like Elemental Annihilation Wave.
Gotcha.
And on a critical success, the target takes double damage and is dazzled for a round. For 3 actions, it's 60 feet and deals half damage on a failure.
You haven't seen my final form. I must continue charging my attack for another
full rounds, it deals... whether you hit or miss, it explodes in an area, dealing electricity damage to everything, and you spark with electricity for a minute, dealing electric damage to creatures that grab you or hit you with an unarmed strike or non-reach melee weapon, and you can heighten it. Ignite Fireworks creates a fireworks display for fire and sonic damage. Could dazzle.
You can see the Sione casting Ignite Fireworks here on the facing page. Impending Doom, sift through all sorts of possible futures and pick the one that is worse for your opponent. Show them a vision of that doom.
And they get worse over the course of 3 rounds. because they get this bigger and bigger sense of impending doom, and then they take mental damage. So depending on how they saved, it may even on a success, they're like, oh no, that's fine. And then wait, no, and they flat-footed, and then finally they become frightened 1 and take half damage. But the worst version is critical failure, where they're immediately flat-footed and frightened 3. On the second round, the frightened takes down to 2, but they become stunned 1. And on the third round, they're paralyzed with the impending doom,
and then they take double damage. Is the kicker to all of that. Yes.
That's the worst version for them.
Speaking of unavoidable badness, inevitable disaster.
So that one's an actual disaster, where the impending doom is the feeling of doom, but inevitable disaster is an actual disaster.
So you put into motion a chain of events that will visit doom on your enemy at some point in the future. You're not quite sure how or when it'll occur. Some kind of strange accident occurs 1d4 rounds later, which damages them, regardless of where they're located at the time.
That's right. It deals 55 damage.
Mm-hmm.
And the damage type depends on the accident.
Then, finally here, we've got inexhaustible cynicism. Inflict your targets with crushing doubt about everyone and everything around them, so that they're unwilling to receive any effects that receive a willing target. Ingest anything in case it was poison. Don't treat anyone as an ally in case their friends are replaced by imposters. Don't believe anything you're told in case it's lies. Don't believe recall knowledge because it might have gotten a critical failure.
Yep.
So there's some other effects that are like, oh yeah, you can't be like a willing target.
You take mental damage.
This is like a real upgrade to that.
Mental damage at the end of every turn unless you spend at least one action seeking or otherwise interacting with surroundings to disbelieve the illusions that are obviously surrounding you.
Yes.
Everybody is an imposter. Honestly, this spell wouldn't be that much different than that one guy we played with who said he was constantly spending actions checking everybody in case they were placed with a doppelganger.
Yeah.
No, but you only take the damage if you end a round not doing it. And he said he was doing it at all times.
You're right. So he just voluntarily had a high level spell cast on him. Let's pick up again with infectious enthusiasm.
It is not the only spell that starts with the word infectious in the book.
That's true.
Infectious enthusiasm.
But this one is the only cantrip that starts with the word infectious.
It's true. It's a cantrip that gives you a status bonus on attack rolls, will saves, or charisma-based skill checks. As long as it's kind of not in a social situation, because it's considered a major faux pas to use it in a social situation. And an ally who observed you casting the spell within 30 feet when you did so can take a single action to give themselves that kind of a bonus too.
Yeah, because I've been imagining, like, you're talking to someone, you're like, yes, I want to convince you of this thing. Hold on, please allow me to cast a spell that makes me more convincing.
That's right. That's right. And that allows it to mostly be gated by its action economy cost rather than just a thing you spam constantly on every charisma-based skill check outside of combat.
Yes. Then there is Infectious Melody, which is an occult-only spell. 15, it's an emanation around you. Call forth the chords of a tune so catchy that folks hearing it can't help but sing along, making it harder for them to communicate. Everybody who's in that area has to attempt a will save. They're affected unless they critically succeed. And they're very likely to have to sing along to the melody, which is going to mess up their intimidation checks and make it harder for them to properly communicate normally.
Yep, they have to spend an action if they want to talk, if they want to do a normal talking, to make a perform check for performance check for the perform action, which, it doesn't have to succeed. They don't have to sing well, but they have to try. And also they're less intimidating because they're just singing along. Singing along to a tune.
Or as it says, in addition, the creature takes a -2 status penalty on linguistic intimidation checks as singing its threats saps away some of the menace.
And we will kill your family.
The creature's constant humming of the tune also makes it nearly impossible for the creature to remain undetected. This reminds me of that Order of the Stick strip that was about, like, it's like bluff, 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 bluff the stupid ogre, and then exactly. So if you want the ultimate earworm, then pick up Infectious Melody. What about Inner Radiance Torrent?
You manifest your spiritual energy. It deals force damage in a line that could potentially blind the target and give you an aura that causes you to deal extra force damage if you spend 2 rounds casting it. Now, it does have a known typo in the heightened entry where it accidentally heightens for the full value of the 2nd level spell in heightening it 1 level, which, like, as always, you're not going to have a fireball that heightens for 66 each time. Generally, when you're heightening a damaging spell, it'll do equal to or less than taking the spell, dividing it by the level, and seeing how much damage that is. But, whoops, that's my bad. I should have caught that. Instant Armor is a 2nd level spell that is a contingency.
So when you cast a spell, the armor you're wearing is whisked away into an extra dimensional space linked to you.
And you can use the Armor Up action to bring it back.
Yes. So this is very convenient for, if you're walking into any number of places that wouldn't welcome you coming in full plate. And you want to just be able to snap your fingers and suddenly be armored.
Mm-hmm.
Anywhere you go.
That's right.
And what's invisibility curtains do?
It creates a wall, and things on one side of the wall are invisible to those on the other side of the wall. So it allows you to basically, and it can be a ring if you want. So you can just like set up this wall and then be doing a heist on the other side of the wall, and the guards at the other end of the hallway don't see anything because, as far as they're concerned, hey, there's no creatures over there.
Clearly nothing.
And at 7th level, it doesn't even end if you just keep shooting arrows through the wall. It's like, why are these arrows coming out of nowhere?
I mean, eventually something's going to run over to you, but...
Yes, and then they'll be able to see you, because they'll be on the side of the wall that can see it. Invoke Spirits is a spell that causes apparitions of the dead to appear and stalk the living. And you can sustain the spell to keep stalking the living with these apparitions. It basically gives you a horde of like ghostly phantoms that attack people for your necromancer.
Speaking of abilities that help you sneak into dinner parties and just otherwise disguise how badass you are, Juvenile Companion. Do you have a death kitty or a terror wolf? You can transform your companion into a juvenile form. Have a little cub or foal or kitten or puppy or piglet, just tiny size, coming around after you. That remains that way until they use a hostile action. So you can just have them with you, and then they can snap out of it as soon as it's time to battle.
Speaking of contingency spells, Life Connection is a contingency spell where basically, as long as you're within 1 mile of the target, you can use your defend life reaction. When the target takes damage after calculating the amount of damage, you lose an equal number of hit points. The target doesn't take the damage. So you're ready to take the damage for them. They take the other effects that aren't damage.
Mm-hmm.
Lose the Path.
But that's quite the range.
Lose the Path is a reaction that for a 1st level spell is actually extremely powerful, just because even just having a reaction that you can always use is ridiculous at 1st level. Even though it doesn't do that much, but hey, if they succeed, they're ineffective. If they fail, they treat all squares difficult terrain for their stride. If they critically fail, this is true, except also you determine where they move. Except not hazardous terrain or a place they can't stand or something like that. But, and they do become immune for 1 hour because, frankly, a 1st level reaction that potentially can slow them down like that is strong just because it's so spammable.
Yes.
Speaking of low level things that can be amusing, lucky number.
So when you cast this spell,
it's also a contingency.
Yes, you roll a d20 and make a note of the result, and you gain a reaction.
It's called That's My Number.
Yes. So you roll your lucky number as a d20 result on a non-secret attack roll, saving throw, or skill check. When you've rolled it, that's the trigger, and then the effect, you can call upon the fortune stored in your lucky number to re-roll the triggering check. But pushing your luck has a price. If the result is the same number again, you critically fail, regardless of what degree of success you ordinarily would have received.
That's right. So if you get a number that's already pretty high, then you just don't have to care. You do become temporarily immune to lucky number for the day, so you can't just spam it until it's a 1. But if you get a low number, then you can be like, all right, I'll re-roll this 3. But the problem is if you roll a 3 again, then you have pressed your luck too far. Yes. Because the 3 probably wasn't a critical failure, although maybe it was.
Well, you could say it on a 1 if you roll a 1.
Certainly. And if you pick a type of check where it doesn't matter if it's a critical failure, like an attack roll, then okay, the 3 failed. I don't care that it's a critical failure. Magic Mailbox creates an interdimensional link between these 2 containers. And basically what happens is you cast it for an hour, and for the rest of the day, you can leave them shut for 10 minutes, and they will kind of shift between the 2 containers up to 3 bulk of stuff, non-living, non-magical, between the 2. When you open it up, it'll have the new reversed versions.
And how long of range is this thing?
I mean, same plane. Once you have to have them there when you cast it, but until the next day, just within the same plane. And you can keep doing that where you transfer back and forth between them.
So, like, if somebody teleported one of these away, then they could have that really long distance until it wears off?
Yes. And remember, until your next daily preparations means you could just choose not to prepare the slot again and just keep it active.
Yes.
If you have 2 separate groups, you can just constantly be sending, like, intel back and forth or little objects to your person who has the alchemy lab to identify them or whatever you're going to do.
Yeah.
So in the M's, there's a lot of spells that begin with the word magnetic that are magnetic spells, such as magnetic acceleration.
Wait, magnetic acceleration is a magnetic spell? Who would have guessed?
It really actually is. And you make a ranged spell attack roll where it's like throwing the coin at someone, right?
So you magnetize that small metal object like a nail or a coin and then launch it away from you at ridiculous speed. And you make a ranged spell attack roll, which is more accurate if the target's wearing metal armor. Yep. And it does huge amounts of damage for its tiny size because you've magnetized it and are having it accelerate rapidly.
Real good.
Yes, exactly.
Magnetic attraction is going to pluck daggers from hands and coins from belts. It's not really very likely to actually take people's weapons out, which makes sense because it's a 2nd level spell that can target up to 10 objects. That would be absurd if it was going to be likely to disarm 10 people who were fighting you, but it's pretty likely to take just unattended objects on its own, and if you critically succeed, because you have to make a disarm attempt, which needs to critically succeed, you can actually take weapons out of their hands, and it only counts against your 10 objects, so if you had some objects you wanted to attract anyway, you might as well try to pull everybody's weapons and see what happens. Meanwhile, magnetic repulsion is the opposite of magnetic attraction, and it makes it harder for things to hit you with attacks with metal objects because you're repelling them.
Particularly metal creatures have even more trouble.
They're like, whoa, you're greater difficult terrain, you're a pain in the butt. And you can actually heighten it to 5th to make the penalty even worse, and heighten it to 8th to make the penalty absolutely
just try not to wear
ungodly.
Metal armor or wield metal weapons while you've got the spell active.
Yeah, you really shouldn't do that. But if you're a druid, then you're like, haha, I told you guys wearing no metal armor was a good idea.
Now let me smack you with my staff of death.
So there's 2 elemental mantle spells. They are morphs that have multiple options. The mantle of the Frozen Heart surrounds you with ice magic, and so you basically get to pick 2 of the options, and you can switch around which 2. Chilling Ice to give you resistance to cold. Heart of Ice, when things are touching you or messing around with you, they take cold damage. Ice Glide, where you don't have to bounce on ice, because you can kind of glide on ice. And then Ice Claws, where you gain a climb speed and an icy claw attack.
And how about the Mantle of the Magma Heart?
So that one's a little different because you kind of send a bunch of magma into you. And so you can erupt in lava, which causes you to grow to size large because you're surrounded in just a bunch of lava. And it's kind of like, you get 2 of the following again, and you can switch them out. Fiery Grasp, where you gain a lava fist attack. Heart of Fire, where you become so hot, things that touch you take fire damage. And Warming Flames that actually protect you from both cold and fire. So those are the 2 mantles.
Then we have Mimic Undead, a 2nd level spell that does what you might think it does.
It turns a mimic into an undead?
No. It allows you to be an undead mimic. Well, not in that way anyway, but it allows you to pretend to be, to wrap death around you and make senses like life sense and other stuff like that have trouble detecting you as anything other than undead. Detection spells that sense living creatures have issues, all sorts of things. So you are, you're generally well disguised, and mindless undead like probably just aren't even gonna attempt the perception check. So if you got like if you have like an evil necromancer's laboratory guarded with all sorts of mindless undead, then you can just waltz right in as an undead and be fine.
I mean, if it's guarded by a necromancer's guard zombies, they may attack you anyway because like, they're maybe attacking anything.
But like, yeah, but still though.
If you're just going through a horde of zombies that are killing all living, then it says they don't have a reason to attempt perception to notice.
Well, I was thinking about too, like Geb. Like if you're walking down the street in Geb, it's like, yes, I'm totally undead. Everybody.
You could.
Yeah.
There's a lot of intelligent undead there. They would get a check, but they might not.
But they might not necessarily be thinking like every person I pass is someone that I want to closely scrutinize to make sure they're not
intelligent undead get the check. Only mindless undead don't.
Yeah, no, but like but don't they have to be like looking at you or like have some reason to be checking for the spell?
It says that senses such as life sense automatically get a perception check against the spell DC.
But, like, not a huge number of undead have life sense.
If they don't have life sense...
They have to be, like...
Then, yeah, you get a +4 to impersonate them, and you can add your level to proficiency if you're untrained, so they would have to have the same... If they don't have life sense, they have to have the same justification as anybody ever does to notice you when you're impersonating, which means you often won't have to roll if you don't do anything with them.
Just generally walking through
with zombies, you especially won't.
A totally normal undead.
Why do they care? They're mindless undead. They're anti-life. They want to destroy the life, but they have no reason to assume that this zombie-seeming thing is actually a living creature. I, zombie, do perception.
Yes. How about Mind of Menace?
Mind of Menace is another contingency spell. And basically when someone puts mental magic on you, you're going to mess them up. So as a reaction, you could basically frighten them for seeing, like, they were foolish enough to look into your own mind. They'd also give you a bonus against their mental effect because it's like, it frightens them, and then you get a bonus on your save against the effect too.
Mirror Malefactors surrounds a creature in a shimmering ring of illusory mirrors that follow them around and reflecting the target and freaking them out, and having the reflections leap out of the mirrors and attack the target, dealing mental damage. Yep. Unless they're a vampire or otherwise don't have a reflection, which is a funny detail there.
Because then
there are no reflections. You can't have a vampire's non-existent reflections attack them.
That's right. Mirror's Misfortune is a spell that creates you split into a real self and a mirrored version of yourself, and the mirrored version of curses would be attacked with misfortune on their next attacks. So you kind of split in two, and then you have the duplicate do a particular routine that you wanted to do, such as walk to a specific point. A creature can only distinguish you if it spends an action to seek, and if it takes a hostile action against the duplicate, it breaks the mirror, and it potentially gets cursed.
So a lot of these spells have been like more techy or complicated, or other things going on with them. Mud Pit is dirt simple, literally.
Yes.
Mud Pit makes an area on the ground that has mud on it, and the mud is difficult terrain.
Yes, it is a pit of mud.
Yep.
That is what it is. What about Murder Vine?
Murder Vine lets you summon a slithering thorny vine to constrict and crush your foes,
dealing bludgeoning and piercing damage.
And they have to try to escape from it. Yeah.
Yep.
And you can heighten it to make it hit harder.
Nature's Reprisal causes plant life to writhe and lash out against your foes, becoming difficult terrain or even greater difficult terrain if it already was difficult terrain, dealing poison damage anytime someone tries to go through that area, which can make it a real pain to walk through that region.
Mm-hmm. Necromancer's Generosity, that sounds...
It is, it's generous, nice. It heals undead.
Targets one undead minion you control. You can channel negative energy through your magical connection to heal your undead minion and to boost their saves against those nasty positive effects.
Positive effects.
Positive
hey,
effects.
You know what? It's healing.
Mm-hmm.
a necromancer wizard can do on their undead minion. They don't heal the rest of their team, even if their team is undead, but they can heal their minions. I mean, they have to be able to patch their minions up. Necrotize.
You necrotize a part of a creature's body, harming and debilitating it as its body putrefies.
Yikes.
The target takes large amounts of negative damage and one random debilitation to its bones, joints, legs, or muscles that provides additional debuffs to them.
Yep, depending on what randomly gets.
And if you critically fail, then not only do they take double damage, but you can pick a second debilitation to apply in addition to the one that was randomly rolled.
That's right, and you can always pick the one that is most annoying for them.
Yes.
Nudge the Odds is a first level spell where you're basically cheating at games. It gives you a status bonus on gambling games by cheating, and your critical failure is a failure instead, because you know you're never gonna lose badly enough to just completely lose because of your cheating, but it doesn't make you automatically win because you are not just like turning everything into having 5 aces or something like that. You're just kind of nudging your odds. It's only an hour, and it's specifically too short-lived to use for earned income checks.
Also, it causes a facial feature such as a lock of hair or the iris of one of your eyes to have a distinctive golden color that resists magical attempts to conceal, but you can mundanely cover or hide it. But if you get caught using the spell in a casino, they're not going to be happy with you.
Yeah, it says because it prevents losing, big gamblers consider Nudge the Odds a repugnant form of cheating. If you're caught, you are likely to suffer serious consequences depending on the nature of the gamblers you cheated.
Yep.
At 5th level, it's a +2 status bonus, and it increases to last until the next time you make your daily prep, and you can continue spending your spell slot to use it on earned income. Of course, at some point, if you get found out, those gamblers are not going to be thrilled. 10th level spell, Nullify. Oh, look, there's a spell of 9th level or lower. It's automatically defeated as a reaction, but you lose hit points. Because you instantly destroy the spell by just, like, sending the magical feedback into your own body. You're just like, nope. It's really not that much damage that you take, considering that it automatically works. So, even if you're fighting a boss who would have had a way hard DC to counteract, and you were worried, because even on a regular failure, a 10th level spell could counteract a 9th level spell. But you were worried, wait, what if I critically failed? I really need this to not happen. And it's a reaction. So, you're just like, nope. Next.
Ocular Overload. Assault a creature
It's also a contingency.
Yes, with jarring illusions that surround their eyes with blinding flashes of motion and color. Lets you use a reaction to make them roll a fortitude save where it could cause them to be dazzled or blinded
when they try to attack
you.
One with the Land is a 9th level spell where you kind of merge into a natural feature. And you can still be attacked, although you can hide and take cover within the natural feature, but like you're enough there that people can hit you. And it gives you Tremor Sense with a ridiculous range. You make terrain vengeance strikes by commanding the Land to smack things for 5d12 damage. You can increase and decrease the temperature in the area.
You can create and remove difficult terrain caused by natural terrain.
Yep, and a 20-foot burst within 200 feet just a bunch of times. They last until the spell ends, and if someone just like somehow blows up the entire natural feature you're in, you get expelled and take damage.
So hopefully they don't do that. What about Oneric Mire? Looks like a shrouding an area and illusory dream stuff.
Yep, remember that mud pit? So this one's an illusion of a even stickier mud pit.
Yeah, so I see. On a failure, the creature believes they're being pulled down into the earth and maybe even immobilized. So it's like this illusory dream that is trying...
I'm in quicksand! Help me!
Illusory quicksand. What about ooze form? This looks like
a battle form of being an ooze.
This has a ton of options.
Your AC is going to be really bad.
Yeah, but you're going to get a lot of temporary hit points.
Yes, but your AC is going to be really bad because you're an ooze.
Yes, that
but
is
you are
true.
Immune to critical hits and precision damage and visual effects.
You could
it's
be
hard to get immunities in Pathfinder 2nd Edition.
You could be a black pudding or a gelatinous cube or a gray ooze or an ochre jelly. And your battle form continues to get larger with more reach and more temporary hit points and more resistances and all sorts of other stuff.
Gargantuan ooze.
Yes, all the way up to a gargantuan ooze.
That's a big ooze.
It's a pretty big ooze. What about organ sight?
You could see somebody's organs, giving you a bonus on medicine checks against them that depend on their organs, but a -2 on medicine checks if you need to see their skin, because you can see right through to their organs. Plus, you can make a special recall knowledge check with medicine to find vital organs when you cast the spell. If you succeed, then the next time you deal piercing or slashing damage to them, you deal additional precision damage. And on your subsequent turns, you can use this tingle action to attempt the special recall knowledge check again and deal the extra damage again once per turn.
So you're basically having this ability to sort of like focus and understand and then make a precise stab.
Yes, it's like, oh look, this is where your lungs are. Stab.
Yep. Painful vibration sends powerful sound waves through an opponent's body that deals sonic damage and could sicken and deafen them. Pernicious poltergeist creates an echo of a powerful poltergeist that you temporarily anchor up to an area to mess with opponents who come into that area. The poltergeist is not really there, so it can't be attacked or hurt, and remains invisible, just waiting to ambush whoever decided to come into that area.
You get 3 options.
Yes. It can be a deadly assault poltergeist that focuses on a creature in the area, flying through them and dealing negative damage. It can be a spooky poltergeist that frightens, or it can be a telekinetic storm poltergeist.
And you can switch it up each
that
round.
Throws a bunch of objects, debris, and quasi-real objects to deal force damage.
It does quite a lot per round. Quite a lot per round, but it's not going to move its burst.
Yes.
So your enemy has a decent chance to get out of the area. If you have a good way to keep them in the area, you're going to get a lot of value from this. Because like even the fear effect is reasonably decent in a 10-foot
Frighten
burst.
2 on a failure, yeah.
It's not as good as Fear 3, but it also happens every round that you sustain it.
Put that in a choke point and slow your enemies down.
Yep, you can do 4d8 damage, which is a pretty decent amount of force damage. It's got some good uses. Persistent Servant is like.
I mean, if you have some reason to be running a haunted house too.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You've got all your illusions and other stuff going on.
Yep. Persistent Servant is your typical unseen servant, which is except that it lasts until your next daily preparation. You give it 1 job. So it's the one from Sorcerer's Apprentice where you're like, clean up, pick things up off the floor. And the thing is, it takes its own time. You can't like give it further details. Like, no, do this now. So it's not going to help you during an encounter. And also, like, it's really not smart. So if you say pick objects off the floor, it'll pick up trash, misplaced treasure, objects that are supposed to be on the floor, like a mouse trap. It'll pick everything off the floor.
Yes.
But you don't. It's not a minion, even though it creates a creature, and you don't have to like sustain it or anything. It'll just go and do its own thing.
Petal Storm, a cloud of razor-sharp flower petals that thrash violently on the wind and slice creatures that come into its area.
Yep.
So you create
Pretty
this burst.
straightforward.
Yes. Burst of razor leaves.
Whee!
Or petals in that case, I suppose. Phantom Crowd creates a, oh, this is funny. It creates a crowd of humanoids that appear and face you and agree loudly with anything that you say.
Yep. Also, when you cast a composition spell or do a performance, you can sustain this spell as part of that action. And it's difficult terrain for people who haven't disbelieved the illusion unless they can move through crowds at full speed because they're a lion blade or something. And then with Heighten, you could add a bigger crowd.
Why not more, adoring illusory masses?
Why not more, Linda?
How about Phantom Prison?
It completely surrounds a larger, smaller creature in a mobile illusory wall, so they think they are trapped inside a prison, but they are not trapped inside a prison. And they get an automatic will save when the spell is cast before they even attempt to interact with or escape, but then also every time they try to interact, they get a will save too. Otherwise, they're like, no, I'm in a phantom prison. I mean, a real prison.
They try to bash it down.
Pocket Library collects, sifts through some information from the world's libraries, and puts it into your pocket library. So once during the duration, it brings a piece of information to your hand that gives you a +1 status bonus on recall knowledge and prevents a critical failure. Heighten, you can get a bigger status bonus and use it more times.
What's to do with Portrait of the Artist? Let's see. Change your appearance to look like a well-known artist talented in a particular craft or performance. You appear to mimic their skill, though such appearances are merely an illusion. The spell creates illusion of physical artwork matching their style, and onlookers who don't believe are convinced that they're
Or
the
don't
real.
disbelieve.
Yes. Oh, I see. So this lets you basically be. This is basically pretend to be a famous artist and run a forgery
Or
contest.
famous performer. If
Yeah.
they're famous for performing, then they onlookers who don't disbelieve think you're performing really well. But you're not really. So if they interact with your art or actively listen to the performance, they can try to disbelieve. And when the duration ends, fake art disappears, and those who were duped by performance realize it wasn't as good as they thought. They might still not know that you weren't that artist that you claim to be. They might just think, oh wow,
that artist was off
it's
today.
like that actor is just bad. I've never seen them before, and they've heard they were good, but when I think about it, it was not really good.
This could be used for some real reputation sabotage for sure.
Yep.
Positive attunement attunes a creature to the positive energy plane. It can heal living creatures or damage undead creatures.
That's right. That is positive attunement. Prismatic armor.
I see. That's the illustrated one.
Yes,
here.
it's like chromatic armor that we talked about last episode, except for that it's got all the colors.
All the colors of the rainbow.
All the colors.
At the same time.
And it blinds them on a critical failure instead of dazzling.
Proliferating eyes. It plants a visible magical eye sensor on the target's body. That is sight and vision. The eye is highly contagious. That's a brand new sentence in the English language, if I've ever seen one. The eye is highly contagious. The first 2 times the target touches another creature during the duration, the spell buds off an additional eye that implants itself on the creature. What? Which can then bud off 2 eyes of its own. The process can propagate up to 4 times from the original target for a potential maximum of 31 eyes. You can switch between perceiving through your own senses or any of the eye sensors. That is creepy. That is creepy.
You always know how many eyes there are. You can tell which original eyes budded off to make which new eyes.
What? Props to the creativity of whoever came up with this thing.
The identity of the new targets other than what you can glean from spying on them. I made that up to copy fit.
Oh, you did? Well, props to you then. I had no idea.
Yes.
I guess you were more amused by my what the heck
Or
is
I
this?
think it was like during that, and Logan was like, we could use a 9th level divination spell. I was
And
like,
you're
what
like-
if there were contagious eyes? Because we already can make non-contagious eyes, and that's a much lower level spell. But what if it was contagious eyes? Then could it be a 9th level spell? And then we were all like, it could. It could if it was
How
contagious
many weird
eyes.
looks did you get when you were like, but what about contagious eyeballs?
I think the editors were definitely like, that's a sentence where it says the
eye
eye is highly contagious.
Be bread.
Look, it's just, it is what it is, alright?
Mm-hmm.
Stump Monkey says no one needs 31 eyes, but you don't know if you need 31 eyes or not
Contagious robes of eyes, yes.
until after you've needed the 31 eyes and you were like, I only got 30 eyes. Plus, you get to see who chains to who, so you can sometimes determine who's connected to each other.
How about Protect Companion?
Well, that one's a pretty simple one. It's a 1-action spell to give a circumstance bonus to AC to your companion. And you get a reaction life block where you can protect your companion by taking damage yourself.
And you can heighten it up to make it more powerful.
Yes.
Then there is, let's see, Protector Tree.
Yep.
Which...
Very powerful first level spell.
Yes, creates a
for
tree
a first level
in
spell.
an unoccupied position. When an ally
lasts for a
adjacent to
minute.
the tree is hit by a strike, the tree interposes its branches and takes damage first.
Yes. Also, it has AC 10 if someone actually just wants to attack the tree for some reason.
So it's like a shield, but it's a tree. And
Yes.
it's like actually a living tree at the end.
And it protects everyone who's adjacent to it if your party is like surrounding the tree.
Yes.
Plus, if it survives at the end, there's a tree. Puff of Poison is a cantrip that puffs poison out onto people, dealing persistent poison damage plus regular poison damage.
Quick sort. Magically sorts a group of objects into neat stacks or piles, either separating them based on an easily observed factor, such as color or shape, or sorting them into order stacks depending on a clearly indicated notation, such as page number, title, or date. This seems extremely convenient.
Yep, and it can, if you sort all 200 objects, it takes 1 minute, and if you're sorting only 30 or fewer objects, it only takes a single round to sort them, and just instantly it automatically sorts them. The fact that you can sort, that it takes 10 times as long to sort that, well, a little more than 6 times as many objects is because it sorts in n log n time. Right?
Yeah.
Like any other quick sort.
I love that you thought of that.
I mean, I'm not the one who made the spell, but I am the one who made sure that it sorted in n log n time.
The fact that you told me that, I was pretty sure that you made sure that you would have made sure that was accurate.
Yes, well, I mean, it's very
important.
important.
Lost our charge cord for a sec.
If you have quick sort, then that's what it has to do. Rapid Adaptation is a 2nd level spell where your companion Eidolon suddenly goes through evolution to adapt to an area that you're in. So if it's an aquatic area,
that'd be
that it can get a
too.
swim speed, or an Arctic area, severe, extreme cold. Yep.
Yeah, desert area, protection from severe and extreme heat, and better at balancing on sand. Forest to get scent. Mountain to be better at climbing and not falling on rubble. Plains to just be faster, and underground to get dark vision.
Because you're underground.
That's really useful.
Ravenous Portal. Now, this is similar to what I tried to claim Mimic Undead was, although it doesn't have any undead. So, it is an abjuration spell that you place on a door. And what happens is, when someone tries to open the door, and they're not like the person that you said could open the door normally, the door transforms into a mimic, cannot move from the spot where the door is, and it's hostile to everything, including you, if you're somehow there. And it just starts attacking everybody. And, the mimic is helpful. No, not you. You and 10 other creatures, it's helpful to. But it's hostile to anything else. And, you cannot move the mimic unless you're capable of moving the entire door. And once the mimic is dead, the door goes back to normal. So this is not a way to, like, get through an adamantine door by turning it into a mimic and killing the mimic.
But it is a way to mess up anybody who's chasing you. If you're running away from allies, slam the door and then cast Ravenous Portal on the door and then have them...
They have to fight a mimic before they can keep chasing you. And it's like a mimic is stronger than something you would be able to summon with a 4th level summoning spell, and you don't have to sustain the spell. So it definitely has its uses. And we're back to the witch.
Yes.
Our witch friend. It's 4704 now, which is even longer after that. And she's now like, oh yeah, when I was a child, magic was a mystery, but now, I've worshipped Gazra and wandered with the winds, but my patron is encouraged by wind-related things even more. And we're gonna figure out some new stuff.
And as with all the other ones, I recommend reading them yourself.
Yep.
We give a general sense of what's going on with
Speaking of wind and air and
reading
yourself,
Take
read
a deep
the air.
breath as a cantrip. Survey the social situation. Show courtesy to all around you. You can recall knowledge using society to gather information about the immediate social situation and be a little better at making impressions.
And it comes from the kind of like idea, which is something that shows up in 7 Asian cultures of not 7, several Asian cultures of reading the air being a way of getting a sense of the room, like as that phraseology, because we had an Asian freelancer who wanted to put that in as a cantrip to sort of go with that kind of idea, and it seemed really cool, so that's what we did. Repelling Pulse is a pulse of telekinetic power that's just like, boom, and it sends those fools away from you while they take force damage.
What about Replicate? Create an illusory magical double of a willing or unconscious creature of 8th level or lower.
Yep.
That physically looks and behaves similar to them. It can move, interact, speak short sentences, and do other basic attacks. The duplicate is your minion.
It can be for Weekend at Bernie's.
Yes.
Hey everybody, it's me! As long as they're unconscious.
And you can heighten it up to increase the maximum level of the target.
Yep. People are saying that maybe you could turn your tower shield made out of a door into a mimic, or turn your door mimic into a tower shield. Yeah, I think at the point where it's a tower shield, that it's probably not a door.
What if it's a door that has a painting of a tower shield on it, and then you turn that door into a mimic?
And then you draw a tunnel into the door,
yes.
and then a Roadrunner runs into it. Meep meep. Yep. Restyle is a spell that allows you to just restyle clothing to fit your personal sense of style. I was thinking about it the other day. I was like, would Dragon PCs you be able to use this? And then you can't quite, because it doesn't actually change the entire body shape of the clothing to match your style. It specifically says it doesn't alter its overall shape, size, or purpose. It can change texture, pattern, minor parts of its design to have a better style. So I was like, no, that's not going to exactly let a dragon wear something that a human was previously wearing, but it's
what
still
about
an
that other
interesting
spell
idea.
that was about, like, transforming your attire?
Those are illusions. That'll be fine.
Yeah.
You can have an awesome clothes no matter what. Rewinding Step is a pretty cool time spell, and if it gives you alarm bells of like, oh gosh, do I have to remember everything that happened after I cast Rewinding Step? No, you don't. It's a 10-minute duration. We cast it for a minute, and you anchor your location in time. And so, as long as you're within 500 feet of your temporal anchor space, you could spend an action to instantly return to the space that from your rewinding step.
Yes.
It doesn't actually rewind all of time for you. It just rewinds your physical location back to the time when you were there. And you can heighten it to even go 1,000 feet or even a mile away. So that you just have a one-action get-out-of-jail-free card by zooming time. It's useful because of the fact that it is not actually teleportation. And so it is obnoxiously difficult for people to stop you from doing it.
You only have to spend a single action at the...
Oh, sure.
You take a minute to set it up, but then you only have to spend a single action at the time of using it.
But compare 9th level this thing to the quickened feat on a 5th level dimension door.
Oh, yeah, I see.
Which also goes a mile. But the difference is, do you have a dimensional lock? It literally is not a teleportation effect. You would need to, like, control time. It is almost impossible to actually lock someone down and be sure that they can't get away if they have one of these. Or at least there aren't very many effects in the game that could actually stop it. Now, the disadvantage is there's a 10-minute time during which that you can use it. So you are on a timer. But during that timer, you have very, very high confidence that you can get out.
How about Rip the Spirit, which I read as R.I.P. the Spirit.
Rest in peace, the Spirit.
At first, I was like, R.I.P. the Spirit. That
it deals negative damage and drains people by actually literally ripping at their spirit. Rah, rah, rah. And you can actually spend more actions to do more negative damage. Or even hit everybody and rip all their spirits. Or rest all their spirits in peace.
In pieces.
In pieces.
Roaring Applause. Flamboyant Flourish to...
Very powerful spell.
Yes. To cause your targets to become distracted. On a success, their applause keeps them from using reactions. On a failure, they're applauding you so vigorously, they're also slowed and can't... and trigger reactions based on the manipulate trait. And in a critical failure, they're so distracted by the applauding that they're just fascinated by you.
So, Hideous Laughter is already one of the low-key strongest spells in the game. This is one level higher, and it is like a Hideous Laughter that also triggers attacks of opportunity when they have failed, which is very strong if you have a bunch of people on your team who you've built, and you're like, I know a lot of people on my team have attack of opportunity.
And if you heighten it up to 6, you can target up to 10 creatures.
Yes, that's just like a target-rich environment for your reactions. You can do so much damage to them. And, like, with Hideous Laughter already being so strong, who would not want a even stronger Hideous Laughter? I certainly would want it, because it's extremely strong. The only problem is that if I cast Roaring Applause 6 on all of my enemies so that I can stop them from, so I can get all my AOs for my AOO team, and then the enemy wizard casts Roaring Applause 6 on the PCs so they can't take AOs unless they critically succeed on their save, then we'll all just be clapping for each other, and at least it's good sportsmanship. but I won't get my attacks of opportunity. And then anyone who's watching is like, wow, these demons and crusaders are really good sports. They're always applauding each other's moves.
Murder punctuating the applause.
Yep.
Then
don't you want to summon an army of skeletons, but not have to deal with the complete obnoxiousness of actually controlling an army of skeletons one by one?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Then rouse skeletons.
Misshapen skeletal forms erupt from a solid surface such as stone floor. Rise, skeletons, rise! They create difficult terrain and do all sorts of damage, and you can sustain the spell to move that area of skeleton-y doom.
Each time you sustain it, more skeletons come out, so if anybody tries to damage or destroy them, it doesn't matter.
Damaging or destroying skeletons is irrelevant.
It is irrelevant. You have very few spells will have a line that says damaging or destroying the skeletons is irrelevant.
Yes, just always more skeletons.
Resistance is futile.
Always skeletons.
Destroy the necromancer, not the skeletons.
Yes, well, we know what skeletons don't necessarily have too much of anymore is blood.
They have bone marrow.
They do have bone marrow. I mean, they could produce blood, but they don't have any way to... Anyway, Sanguine Mist.
Let's suck some blood out of you with a blood-sucking fog. The fun part about the blood-sucking fog is that the blood-sucking fog remembers who its buddy is. It remembers who its parent is, who created that blood-sucking fog, and so it's going to give you temporary hit points. Every round when you sustain it, as it sucks the blood out of things, it'll give it back to you. Yeah.
Everybody wants
who wouldn't want a vampire fog so that you can just keep getting temporary hit points over and over again?
Scatter. Then there's another cantrip, Scatter Scream.
It's a great cantrip.
Yeah, let's do.
It does. It's basically electric arc, but they have to be next to each other. But it's also difficult terrain for a minute. So you can set up difficult terrain throughout the area while also dealing some bludgeoning damage to two creatures as long as they're next to each other. And hey, even if you only hit one creature, you still had 2 squares of difficult terrain, right? If you're in a narrow corridor, you could put the difficult terrain on your target and on the space right in front of them so that they have to go through that space to get to you, for example.
Okay, but this next
Schadenfreude is the funniest. Schadenfreude is the perfect spell for the people who, and you know who you are, who are like, every time I do anything in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, I critically fail everything. You should get Schadenfreude because
if you have a designated dice jail for when you always fail,
you critically fail every save.
And you find yourself putting multiple dice in dice jail every session.
Because Schadenfreude is actually legitimately very powerful first level reaction. Even when I said that other first level reaction was strong, it still didn't do anything on a successful save. This does. But the thing is, you have to critically fail your save against a foe's effect first. It's a foe's effect. You can't just get one of your friends to do some kind of pathetically pointless thing to you that you're going to critically fail so you can Schadenfreude. And then when that foe makes you critically fail a save, you're like, oh yeah? Well, Schadenfreude. And so they get distracted by how amused they are about your utter failure, and they take a penalty on perception and will saves, at least, for one round. And potentially, they get stupefied. So who makes you roll saves a lot? Enemy spellcasters, right? And you're going to make their spells fail.
I choose to imagine that this stunned one from the critical failure is because they're laughing so hard in one of those mocking, anime villain laughter.
It does say it's lost in its own amusement.
Yeah. So it loses the action because it's laughing at you.
Yes, that's right. Scorching Ray is a 2nd level spell. You can pew off one ray for a little bit of fire damage, but as long as you spend at least 2 actions, you get a lot more fire damage and to multiple targets. As usual, a 1-action version is going to be weaker than half of the 2-action version by a substantial amount because of the fact that you can triple cast a 1-action version. You can't even double cast a 2-action version. Yes. It's just how 1 and 2-action versions of spells work. In most cases. It's not the case for Magic Missile, but that's because Magic Missile has some very interesting balance points that it doesn't actually scale as fast as certain other spells. It's still so good that you might want to consider picking it around for all of its various reasons. Magic Missile, that is. Scorching Ray is going to hit more than Magic Missile in most cases. Pretty much any case except for I mean, even the one action version, it's one level lower and hits for about the same amount, but it could miss. Magic Missile's not gonna miss.
Seashell of Stolen Sound lets you capture a sound in the seashell to store, and it could be really anything, because this is definitely a very flexible and versatile spell. Capture a sound, and then you'll be able to play it back later.
Elf says once you get Schadenfreude, you'll stop crit failing once you get it. You know what, Elf? If there was a spell that I could add to my repertoire as a sorcerer and guarantee that I never crit failed again, I would add that to my repertoire. I don't care that I never get to cast it and that one of my first level slots is just worthless at this point.
Never crit fail against enemy spellcaster ever again.
That's great. Yeah. That's great. I'm already fine.
Never crit fail against saving throw.
Yeah, I'm already fine. If Karma has decided that's how it's going to treat me, then I've already won. And I didn't even have to spend a spell slot to do it. So yeah, Seashell of Stolen Sound, like you said, you can steal a sound and play it back. Shadow Army. So, I mean, you might be like, okay, I made a skeletal army, and that was cute. And made a ghost army that we saw earlier in the episode. That was actually kind of cool. But what if I could make an army of shadow clones that were all me? And not only that, I was hidden virtually indistinguishably among all the clones, and nobody knew which one was the real one.
And anybody who was in the area, the giant area of the clones, was constantly taking mental and bludgeoning damage.
60-10 damage.
And being
And it's by the way, unlike all the rest of these things, it is not sustained. It's just there.
Yes.
And also,
you get to pick a condition.
You can make them clumsy and feeble, flat-footed, or slowed on a failed save. And yeah, so that is the 10th level spell, Shadow Army.
Yes. So in conclusion, everything is Fea.
Everything is Fea. Now you do have to hide or sneak among your clones, because only one of the clones is going to be like, presumably since you got a 10th level spellcaster, is going to be like casting a spell.
Yes.
So you can cast it, and then you just hide amongst the clones. It's like, wait a minute, which of those Feas did that? It could have been any of them at this point. But if you don't hide, it's like, oh, it was the Fea who just cast a meteor swarm on us.
Yes. But they're still going to have to do with the area.
Actually, she probably can't, because she's Fea.
Yeah.
The Fea who just cast weird on us.
Yes.
That was the Fea that was the real Fea. But as soon as you've hidden, it's like, which one? There's so many Feas.
And it's not in the future, because this one's 3 actions, so you're probably going to want to be quickened to try to hide after your initial casting. But in the future, you could easily do 2 action spells. And it's like 2 action spell, hide among the clones of myself.
Also, if you really want to screw with someone, since it has a 500-foot range, if you can somehow hide the casting of the spell while you're invisible, they might assume you're somewhere in the 50-foot burst, but you could just be somewhere else.
Wait for them.
And they're like, "Oh, we'll just do a 50-foot radius to hit everything in the Shadow Army." It was like, I was not in the Shadow Army. I was elsewhere. I'm really sorry about that, buddy.
No, you're not.
No, I'm not. Speaking of shadow, cool thing, Shadow Projectile is a 3rd level reaction. Anytime an ally within 20 feet of you makes a ranged attack roll. So this is really relevant because at least some of those other reactions, which were super spammable, were like the enemy had to do something. But here, this is just like free action economy, because if your ally is going to make a ranged attack roll, they're going to do that like every round. Now, they do get... a target does get temporarily immune to it, so it's a trick you can only do once against that particular target. But you're literally going to get a chance to do it every time, because you have an archer in your party, and they're always going to shoot an arrow. It makes an illusory duplicate of that arrow. And so, basically, they were like, wait a minute, which one was the actual arrow again? Which one was the shadow projectile? And so, they take mental damage from the shadow projectile, and they're almost certain to be flat-footed against the actual attack, because of like, wait, one of these is a fake. They have to critically succeed if they want to not be flat-footed. Very handy, especially if your team has a ranged rogue, then they love you, because you're gonna make this into a sneak attack too. It's like, yeah, I did 3d8 mental damage and all the sneak attack damage.
There you go.
There you go. And if the rogue is one of those rogues who can like keep sneak attack damage up. Once they have it up, they can inflict flat-footed. Then it's like, okay, I give you the first flat-footed. Now you take it from here. Because I can't do that reaction again on them since they're temporarily immune for an hour. Shadow Raid is another thing. So it's like, okay, we talked about making shadow clones of yourself. And we talked about making, like, little ghosts. But what if you want to make horrible shadows that cavort around, dealing physical damage to your enemies and then concealing things? So that's Shadow Raid. You make a swarm of shadows, and it's constantly messing around. Creatures that try to seek or interact with the Shadow Raid can try to disbelieve it, and then they realize, wait a minute, this was actually an illusion. But even so, they still only half the damage because it is partially real. Shadow.
Yes. Shift Blame, otherwise known as the reaction of, well, I didn't do that. You or another creature attacks a creature or fails a deception, diplomacy, or intimidation check. You can use a reaction to alter the target's memory of the triggering event, so picking another creature with the capacity to make the triggering attack or skill check, and make them remember that the chosen creature was actually responsible.
Yep. It was
Which
me.
it could be you. You could take credit for something that wasn't you, or you could deflect blame for something that.
Yep.
That
Also,
you did
it's not forced to react to the new memories in a particular way, and is likely to question them if they contradict other information as it knows, or are extremely implausible for the situation.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, if you attack someone with a great sword and are like,
it was your friend.
It was
with
your
the dagger.
It was your wife over there who doesn't have any weapons.
Yes.
And then it's like, I have a memory of her attacking me with a greatsword. But also, Linda is standing next to me with a bloody greatsword, and my wife has no weapons. Why do I have this memory? I am very sus of this, especially since I saw Linda do a magical spell.
Yes.
Which, I don't know that it was an attempt to alter my memory, but something is very suspicious.
Yes.
Alright, so, Sonata Span, you play a tune, and it actually creates notes that are like, you know, like a musical, like...
A bridge?
It creates a bridge, but the bridge is, like, out of, what do you call, like, the line that has music notes on it? A staff, yes. It's a staff with music notes on it. And then people can walk over the music. Which, presumably, I would say it plays the tune as you keep walking over the notes, but it doesn't say that. Soothing Blossoms make friendly soothing blossoms in an area that makes it way easier to get rid of poison and disease effects in there, and give you assisted recovery on persistent damage. The blooms are just going to do that against all persistent damage, which is very handy if you have to deal with annoying afflictions and persistent damage.
Kitsune Warlock says, verbal component, the spell brought to you by Raid Shadow Legends. I swear they're sponsoring everything nowadays. You see so many ads for them. Anyway.
So let's do one last spell and then end it on Soothing Spring.
Yes, let's do it.
It actually makes like an onsen. And the onsen is hot and warm and mineral rich.
And it makes you be not fatigued anymore.
You
and
get
heal
healed for
and
28 hit points.
Man, that sounds nice.
If you're actually fatigued because like you're actually tired and you've been up for a long time, it doesn't remove the underlying source of fatigue, such as lack of sleep. It'll come back. But if you got fatigued by an enemy spell, then you're just all good. Yeah, it's a very nice spell. Now we're going to do Spiritual Attunement.
Yes. Where you attune yourself to a spiritual plane of the outer sphere.
So we had sort of a positive attunement before where we could attune ourselves to positive energy, and potentially that helps with healing or harming undead. But when we're tuning to an outer sphere, that's going to make us gain alignment traits for the plane that we chose, which is going to help us deal with weaknesses from that alignment, and it's going to give us resistance to damage that opposes the energy of our chosen plane. Which means that the second part means it's not even useless for like an angel to spiritually attune more to heaven, because they actually have a weakness to evil, so they might as well get some resistance by like pouring more heaven stuff into themselves. The resistance can increase if you heighten the spell. The spout cantrip is a fun one. So it's
a water spout?
It's a water spout, so it's a 5-foot cube, which means that typically you're only going to hit one thing, but if you've got a bunch of tiny creatures that have piled together into a spot, or like Isoki that are sharing, or Morlocks that are sharing a space, you can get more than one. and it's a reflex for like the kind of typical cantrip damage, the 1d4s, and if you cast it when you center it in a body of water, it's a 5-foot burst, so that's 4 squares. It's got to be not a puddle or a bathtub. It has to be like a body
pond
of
or
water.
a creek,
It could
like
be a
some
pond
kind
or a
of
creek,
body of water.
Yep. And so that's pretty cool. It's definitely cool if you have if you know you're going into the water, because you can get up to 4 squares worth of things. Like if the enemies have packed themselves in, you're gonna hit the most of any cantrip that does that much damage with Spout in the water.
With sudden recollection, you can either plant some knowledge deep in a creature's subconscious, or make a willing creature forget an information until a specific thing happens.
Yep. It basically subconsciously changes what's going on with someone's memory. It is uncommon because it's a complex thing, but it's, yeah, basically just like Linda said, when the trigger happens, it either is going to suddenly remember the information, or you could have a piece of information that's suppressed until it experiences a trigger and then suddenly remembers that information.
Mm-hmm.
So that way, even if it knows that this spell exists and was cast on it, it won't actually know whether or not you chose to suppress a real memory until the trigger, or when it experiences the trigger, it gets a memory back, or whether you made something up. Summon Anarch. It's like Summon Celestial or Summon Fiend, except it summons chaotic Celestials, Fiends, and Monitors.
Mm-hmm. What about Summon Archmage?
Well, that one is an incarnate spell. So, incarnate spells are, they're kind of like your Final Fantasy summon, where it doesn't stay on the board for that long, but therefore does something ridiculous. As opposed to the more standard summon spells, where it's gonna be there the whole fight, but you have to keep sustaining it, and it can kind of do a variety of things that the creature normally does, and has to have some safeguards built in for, like, what if the creature does this weird thing?
Mm-hmm.
Summon Archmage, though, we know exactly what it's gonna do. An immense Archmage is gonna appear. It's gonna use Archmage's amplification to shoot off a burst of magical force, dealing force damage to creatures, and then it's going to feed magic power into beneficial spells so they can last a little longer, and then it'll leave on the next turn, rebuking your foes by draining away their magic, potentially stupefying them, and ending the spell. Ending a beneficial spell.
Yeah, ending a beneficial spell that's on them, yes.
Yes. So that is Summon Archmage. Summon Axiom is the lawful version of Summon Anarch.
Mm-hmm.
Summon Deific Herald is also an incarnate spell, but this one is very long because it has a different Deific Herald ability for any of the different alignments. And basically, the Herald's going to appear. Depending on which alignment it is, it's going to do some kind of a thing, usually an aura when it arrives, and then it'll depart and do typically some kind of attack, but sometimes it's healing. Like,
or freedom of movement for the chaotic good ones.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, it's often an attack, but it's not always. Or it can be a debuff, like Neutral Evil is a Crushing Despair. It does some kind of big thing after it leaves. So it starts by giving an aura for the round while it's there, and then it does a big thing at the end. And then it has a list of all the heralds.
Of the heralds
for the 20
of the core deities.
Yes. And their names, because you have to know what the name of the thing that you're summoning is, right?
Yes, naturally. What about summoning a Draconic Legion?
A Draconic Legion.
If you decide, hey, I am fighting this battle, and you know what this battle needs? A Legion of Dragons.
Well, then you summon either a Legion of Chromatic or Metallic Dragons. And the dragons... Oh, yeah, so with Incarnate Spells, the Incarnate Spell kind of actually makes its own decisions of what to do. And you don't, but it's typically trying to help you. And so the dragons decide to deal one type of damage in a 120-foot line, and another in a 60-foot cone that cannot overlap. And creatures that are in either of the areas take the damage. If you're in both, obviously you don't take both of the damage, because it's possible to be in two areas that don't overlap. And when they depart, they strike with fury and slash into a draconic frenzy, and then they leave.
Oh wait, this gets even more ridiculous. Summon Kaiju?
It does. Summon Kaiju.
10th level rare spell?
Yes. It does.
Conjure a legendary rampaging giant monster?
It sure does. And it's got the named Kaiju.
Oh yeah, Agnazar the Star Titan?
Yep.
Agra the Forever Storm?
Yep.
Oh man, this is cool.
It's got these. Yep. It's got all the Kaiju. Our freelancer, Kendra Lee Speedling, wrote the incarnate spells and clearly researched these Kaiju to determine which kind of attacks the Kaiju should use. And so they use two iconic abilities. It's got Mogaru, the Final King. All Garthun the Moongrub, all sorts of Kaiju for you. So Summon Lesser Servitor is a spell that exists at low levels because all of those summon, like Celestial and Summon Fiend and whatever, are a reasonably higher level spell. In part because there is a kind of not that much... There are not that many creatures in that category at lower levels, so you might not even be able to summon anything if you had a Summon Celestial that was at level 1. That's part of it. Also, just like getting a Fiend or a Celestial in general, and getting the stronger servitors of your deity, so it has a different feel. So Summon Lesser Servitor is a spell that kind of mixes in, and you can summon... It's not even from your deity, because those are guarded by the more powerful servants, but it summons only some weaker creatures that are from a variety of alignments that don't oppose you. And when you add all those together, then there's more or less going to be a few choices at most levels. Except there are certain alignments that would not have enough choices because they were like exactly the wrong alignment that is opposed to so many other alignments that all of the choices at that level aren't available except 1 or 0.
Yeah.
And so therefore, it adds on a few animals that you can pick just to make sure that if you pick the optimal strategy to de-optimize your ability to pick servitors, that you, at each level that you would still have a few servitors to pick from.
Mm-hmm.
So it's got some animals in there. Summoner's Precaution is a very handy contingency spell. You spend 10 minutes, you set it up, and basically what you can do is your Eidolon, if your Eidolon would take damage, that would bring you to 0 hit points. So that would be your Eidolon, not you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a death effect, because that'll just kill you guys anyway. Then you just kind of react to be like, go away, Eidolon. And Eidolon unmanifests, and you cannot bring it back for a minute. But in exchange, you just don't take any of the damage that would have done that. It's particularly good if you get hit by a big crit or a big critical failure against a spell that was like, did a huge amount of damage, and you know, you were fine before that. It's not as good if you were like at 3 and you take 5 damage.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, you prevented the 5 damage. You're still up. That is good, but you're not going to get your Eidolon back for a minute, and you probably will take the 3 eventually anyway, again. But it's still very powerful.
But it takes 10 minutes to cast, and it lasts until your next daily preparation, so you decide when it's most useful.
It's a very effective wand as well because of its duration.
Oh, yeah, good point.
Yep. Summoner's Visage makes your Eidolon looks like your identical twin. And it doesn't gain new abilities or change its statistics. It just cosmetically looks like your identical twin. It still only uses Eidolon stuff. It still, isn't gonna... It literally cannot gain any additional statistics or abilities from this. Like, even if you change it so that it... I don't know, like... If it normally can't hold something or speak for whatever reason because of its other form, the change is purely cosmetic. Now, obviously, you can have an Eidolon that already had hands or a mouth. But it still can't use any gear.
Yeah,
so.
but it's still useful for like blending in a lot more than an Eidolon would.
Yep, and it can confuse people because they don't know which one is going to be the Eidolon, and the one that's the Eidolon usually has higher AC.
Mm-hmm.
Synchronize is a first level spell, and the thing about Synchronize is you put a sigil on your targets, and when you cast it, you set the duration and choose a time, and after that time, the spell ends. Even though other spell durations aren't normally exact, Synchronize has precise duration to the second. Most spells in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, you can see in the core rulebook, it's like you can't like measure with your clock a 10-minute spell to figure out 10 minutes, because actually they could last like a few rounds or even a minute or two longer or shorter than that, and it's not exact.
But Synchronize
is exactly as long as it says it's going to be. Exactly. Up to 24 hours. So if you need to Synchronize, you can't do it with some other spell, but you can do it with Synchronize.
Then there is Tame, a cantrip that you can use with non-hostile domesticated animals to improve their attitude, make them feel more comfortable with you.
Mm-hmm. That's right. A lot of people have said some things. Thanks for subscribing, Stop Monkey. So, Tempest of Shades. Well, we could summon some shades, and we could create shadow duplicates of ourselves, and we could summon spirits. But Tempest of Shades channels death to call an amalgam of vengeful dead, slain by your enemies and allies alike, as a tornado, and it is in fact a necromantic incarnate. So it's a vortex of death that drains and then frightens. It's pretty powerful.
I would be scared if a vortex of death appeared in my space. I'm just saying.
I would be scared of that, and I'd be scared of anything that drains and then frightens. Yeah. Because I don't want to be drained or frightened.
Are you scared of the frightening, or are you scared of the fear, or is it fear what scares you?
I'm both scared of the fear because it's a really nasty condition, and the fear scares me. So then we get Journey Beyond from our good friend the Witch. Mm-hmm. So it's communing with Pepper the Familiar, and begins the final chapter of the adventure. The divine powers from the patron through Pepper have been mysterious, but they've tracked down the necessary tuning fork to go to the plane of air to finally further the patron's purpose. Seek the unknown. So that is the final entry, and it was in 4715. That's 6 years ago. All right.
Then we have temporary glyph. You temporarily bind a hostile spell into a symbol. And then you can, you can set a password for it to release it. And so I see. So this is about binding a spell into a glyph that you can then have pop out at a later time.
Yes, but it's only for a minute. So it's a fast casting, fast acting
glyph of warding type thing. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yep.
I was wondering. I was like, this seems like glyph of warding, but I know it's going to be different. Yeah. Very cool.
Yep. That's correct. It's fast-acting, but short-lasting glyph of warding. Then there's Thicket of Knives, which is a first-level spell that makes your weapon have phantom copies. It's an illusion, so it looks like that you've got this whole thicket of knives, which gives you a status bonus on Deception. And if you're untrained, you can use the feint action anyway.
What about Thundering Dominance? Shroud the target in a powerful predatory aura to amplify its vocalizations, making it more intimidating.
The target is your companion or Eidolon.
Yes. You don't want to be targeting your enemies with this.
Yes.
And allowing them to give a thundering roar that frightens and deals sonic damage.
Sonic damage. That's right. Then there's Time Jump. It's a one-action verbal third-level spell that leaps forward in a few seconds in time, appearing across the battlefield in the blink of an eye. Basically, you gain 2 actions to leap, stand, step, or stride, or burrow, climb, fly, or swim if you have them. But it sort of happens in a compressed time stream, so that the time for other people kind of pauses while you're doing it, and they can't really take reactions against you.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like you teleported, although you didn't. You actually walked that distance, just time didn't seem to be passing. And you can't use it again within 1 minute, or you become stupefied for a minute because you get so disoriented from constantly jumping through time.
Speaking of time, Timely Tutor.
Timely Tutor.
You can connect you or your Eidolon or familiar to the Akashic Record. That's basically the demi-plane
you
library.
Only your Eidolon or familiar. It does not target you.
Oh, your Eidolon or your familiar. I see. I misread.
Yep.
Yes. If you cast it on your familiar can get your spellcasting ability modifier and checks for recall knowledge with lore. And let's see, if you cast it in your Eidolon, it instead becomes trained in the lore skill.
Yep.
Very cool.
That's right. Tortoise and the Hare.
Oh, that's a good spell name.
It is a 2-action 4th level spell targeting one foe and either yourself or one ally, and it siphons the speed from the foe into your ally. So, on a success, the foe is slowed 1 for 1 round, the other target is unaffected, so the same as 3rd level slow, so it's a 4th level spell. On a failure, the foe is slowed 1 for 3 rounds, as opposed to a minute for slow, the 3rd level spell, which typically is equivalent because, you know, the fight's going to be done. And the other target, you or your allies, quicken for a round to step, stride, or strike. On a critical failure, the foe is slowed 1 for 3 minutes, which admittedly is not slowed 2 like the slow spell is, but the other target is quickened for 1 minute and can step, stride, or strike.
Such a fun idea for a spell.
It could potentially give you a slow one plus a haste for a minute, or it can give you a slow one for essentially about the same as a minute because it's 3 rounds and that's going to be the fight, and 1 round of haste, or it'll give the same on a success and it's 1 level higher. It's kind of a perfect example of what something that's 1 level higher can do.
Umbral Extraction looks like you steal a spell, rip a spell that your foe has from their shadow, and then you can then cast it instead.
Yeah, why would you not rip a spell that a foe has from your shadow and then cast it instead? That's what everybody does. Cool kids are doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone likes stealing spells. It's very long because it has to explain
like, what does it mean to steal
happens.
a spell, and what types of spells can you steal?
That's
and
right.
How can you use them, and etc., etc.
And then there's Umbral Graft, which is a 4th level spell that reflects a spell into a shadowy version of itself, depleting the power of the initial spell, where you steal a spell that is kind of active on a foe. And it's like the other one, except you still
so one that's active versus stealing one that's they've got ready to cast later on.
Yep.
Unexpected transposition. You're targeted with an enemy's strike. It's a reaction. You pick a creature other than the triggering enemy because you can't make them hit themselves. But you quickly swap your own position with that of another creature. If they're not willing to swap places, they do get a save. But if they're willing to swap places, like for example, if you are a super squishy person and you cast this to react and put your super tanky person there instead.
Yep.
Then you flop places.
That's right. And it's 6th level, which is decently high level, but it's extremely powerful to be able to decide with a reaction who is going to get hit by the attack. If it's your ally, you can be sure that it will hit your champion or somebody that doesn't really care about being hit as much as you do. Unspeakable Shadow, a 9th level spell, and I will speak no further of it because it's unspeakable. No, but actually,
yeah, clearly, yeah.
It changes somebody's shadow into a horrible monster that kills them, and by kills them, I mean they think it's gonna
kill them, and so they become terrified. But if they critically fail, then they might actually die of fear.
Their shadow kills them at that point.
So
it was speakable, I guess.
It was speakable. There you go.
Variable gravity changes the gravity to either low gravity, so you can jump farther, or high gravity, where you become encumbered, but it's much harder to move you around.
Mm-hmm. With Voracious Gestalt, another 9th level spell, you create a powerful spirit entity that grows and builds strength by consuming the spirits of foes that you both slay.
Nom nom nom.
It starts off by dealing a burst of negative damage. And then if you at the start of each of your turns, if you kill the living creature during the turn, or its damage kill the creature, then you can add the slain creature's soul to the Gestalt, which powers up the effect.
So it does 14d6.
Yes.
It does 6d6 at the end of creatures' turns if they stay in there also. And that's important because powering up the Gestalt increases the radius and increases that 6d6 by another d6. Which in theory could increase all the way up to like 16d6 if you murder things every round.
Yes.
Only for the very last round of the spell.
But still.
Yeah, so you keep you kind of keep sustaining it and it keeps murdering things. And the more you kill, the stronger and bigger it gets.
But
it could eventually be like a 130-foot emanation.
It does have a bag of rat's claws for like.
It's sorry, a 230-foot emanation.
It's got to be like an actual significant threat.
Yeah, you can't just bring rats in there to just pull a rat out of the bag every turn to get a kill. It's got to be a significant creature. Otherwise, it's not strong enough to power your voracious Gestalt.
Yes.
So Wall of Water is kind of a fun one. It's a wall of water, and just as water makes it a pain in the butt to do things that cross the water line because of surface tension, so does the Wall of Water. It puts out fire, projectiles get screwed up, and then you kind of have to swim through the completely static, non-moving water that's in the wall of water. It's very easy, but...
But it still takes time.
It wastes your time because you go up to it, right? And then you're like, oh, okay, I'll swim through it. And that's the second action. And then at that point, if the other thing is not exactly on the other side of the water, you've kind of wasted your turn. I mean, admittedly, the core rulebook does have a section in the playing the game that says, hey, if you're doing a variety of movements that are a combination of different types of movements that wind up taking all three of your actions, like maybe you can homebrew it to only take two of your actions. Only take two and not all three of your actions to deal with this simple low-level wall. Like, it's still very good. Even if you're going to... If your enemy, like the evil lich, puts up the wall of water, even if your GM is nice and lets you use the thing where we'll combine these three and we'll call it two actions, your whole team that wants to get into melee has basically lost a huge percentage of their turn.
Stein asked, what if it was a big rat?
A big rat?
You know, if a rat is, like, powerful enough that it counts for this spell, then that's like the best respect.
Rat ever.
Yeah.
I think. Like, that's a very powerful rat. Warding aggression. It's a magic ward that is fed by your melee strikes. It's pretty rad. It gives you a AC bonus against a particular foe, and basically it depends on how good your strike is. It ends if the foe you attack dies, or at the end of any turn in which you didn't hit that foe with a melee strike. And so you get either a +1 or a +2 to AC against the foe. You get a +1 even if you fail, but you better hit them with another strike, or else you're gonna lose it. You could get a +3, but even then, that's only for one round, and it goes down to +2 for the rest of the duration.
Warrior's Regret. You curse a foe to feel so much regret that they about their violence that they take damage whenever they take damage at the end of their turns whenever they harm.
Yep.
Whenever they harm others. So like it's 1d, so like the baseline is 1d for if they succeed, then at the end of their next turn they take 1d8 damage per different creature they intentionally damage that turn.
That's correct.
If they fail, then it lasts longer.
They take mental damage, which is listed in the heightened effect, and it's got the mental trait, but for some reason it doesn't say it in the top. Yeah. But it's clear from the heightened effect.
The context is mental damage.
Well, and the heightened effect, it says the amount of mental damage the target takes is
but it's mental damage,
increased by 1d8. Yes. So yeah, it can be pretty powerful. It can do up to 4d8 if it keeps damaging a lot of creatures, which is only really a problem for AoE monsters, where it's like, okay, how am I not going to
Damage this many.
damage this many creatures with my attack?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I suppose if it has a fiery aura or something like that, and it's like, I don't want to hurt these other 3 people anymore. I wish they would leave my fiery aura.
Yeah.
I'm trying not to attack them, and please get out of my fiery aura, and they stay in it. Like, it's questionable, and they only attack 1. I don't know what you would say at that point. Maybe it didn't intentionally damage the other 3. But, wash your luck. You kind of wash out, all fortunes and misfortunes and other influences on you to get rid of your bad luck. It's a 2-action cantrip, and once during the minute that you've washed your luck, you cancel out a misfortune. Because it's fortune, so fortune always cancels misfortune. So it's just the normal way that fortune cancels misfortune.
Web of eyes. So there's more eyes? There were already the contagious eyes.
Yeah, but this is a web of eyes.
So many eyes.
But this one is basically you put a scrying sensor on each target just above their eyes, is like a 3rd eye. And basically everybody who's in the link of 5 willing creatures can use an action with the concentrate trait to kind of share what it sees with any number of the other targets. So you're like,
there are
hey,
5 eyes?
Look at this. Yes.
I see.
And only one creature can share its vision at a time. And it basically helps you see things from multiple perspectives. So if like one person is able to observe a creature because they have better perception, they can be like, hey, tap my eye. Concentrate. Look, everyone, there's a hiding creature over there. And once the vision sharing stops, you lose the benefit too, because just because but you might still know like where the creature is.
Yeah.
So for example, if Linda had way better perception than me and she saw a creature that I hadn't even detected, I didn't even know where it was, I would see it while she was sharing her vision because she observed it. But when she stops, I still know where it is, so it's hidden, but I don't see it anymore.
But you also like now know that there was a thing where
I know exactly what it looks like, and it's hidden, but
yeah.
not undetected.
Yes.
Because I know exactly which square it's in. Whirlwind!
Powerful winds. So this is, let's see. This is basically summon giant tornado.
Oh, it definitely does. And it
evokes
a giant tornado.
Oh yes, evoke giant tornado.
For up to a minute, it just whirls around, dealing bludgeoning damage.
You can sustain it to move it.
And it picks things up into the air, and it moves around, and it batters everything.
Or rather, you can move it while you're sustaining it. That makes sense.
Yep. That's right.
Cool.
Winning streak is a fun one. It's a divination. It is good fortune that spreads to others as long as you keep winning. So it's a 4th level spell. You target one creature. For 1 round, it gains the quicken condition to strike, step, or stride. If the target or one of their allies within 20 feet gets a critical success on an attack roll against a significant foe, whoever got the critical success becomes quickened if they weren't already, and the duration is extended by another round. If a full round passes without the target or one of their allies critically succeeding on an attack roll against a significant foe, the winning streak breaks and the spell ends. So, it could be that you spent a 4th level spell and you only get 1 round of quicken on one person. But it could be a lot better than that, depending on who gets critical successes. And who doesn't.
And last but not least, and for this chapter, we have 0 gravity.
Yes.
You can negate gravity's effects in the area, causing creatures to float in place, and they can try to push off surfaces to rocket off in whatever direction they want to.
It's uncommon because dealing with that pushing off situation is kind of a mess to adjudicate. So if you don't want to, then don't include it. But if you do, it's really cool.
If you can levitate or fly, then
whatever.
Yeah, it's totally fine for you too.
Yep. And even if you can't, you can push off, and you can get out of it. That's part of why it is not quite as high level as reverse gravity, while also being a pretty decent radius cylinder. Also, reverse gravity does have the effect that if there is a ceiling, it would eventually put you on a ceiling. This one doesn't, so that's why it's close.
Yes.
Because it could cause you to be stuck, like, in a limbo middle space, which only happens with reverse gravity if there's no ceiling.
Yes.
Yep. So that is the spells that are not focus spells, but they're also focus spells for Magus and Summoner. There's not like a million. Neither of these two classes is ridiculously heavy on focus spells. So Magus and Summoner have focus spells. They are the ones that we talked about in the Magus and Summoner class chat. So you can go to those to hear us talk about them a little bit, like not a lot at that point in time. But let's move on to the rituals because those were not in a class chat.
Yes, fair enough.
Should we do them this episode? There's only a few, or should we do them next time?
Why don't we go ahead and do the rituals here? If there's just a few.
There's only a few. They're long, but we don't have to spend amazing amount of time on them.
So there is the let's see. We start off with the Asmodean wager. Sounds
13 rituals. The 13 rituals of
That sounds like a questionable life decision.
I mean, you make a magically binding agreement between yourself and one or more secondary casters, where each participant stakes something of value on the outcome of an event that has yet to be determined.
Oh, I see. Well, named for Asmodeus and invented by those of the diabolical bent, the ritual has no particular connection to hell and instead relies on the occult connections between the better. So it's called an Asmodean wager, but this isn't literally a bet with hell.
Yes,
That's good to
but
know.
you can bet some pretty ridiculous stuff. You can bet a promise, which gases you to uphold it. You can bet a possession, which forces a transfer, but does not prevent you from trying to reclaim a possession. You bet your life, and you instantly die with no saving throw.
Oh, jeez.
If you bet your life, and then the other person gains an extra life, so the next time they would die, they do not die.
If anybody knowingly and willingly makes attempt to cheat or avoid fulfilling the terms of the wager, the spell automatically deems them the loser and resolves accordingly.
Yep. And if you can't do it if you're mentally coerced or mentally controlled or coerced by any means,
or if you would be immune to the effects. Because if you can't be like, aha, I'm immune to death effects, I shall bet my life.
I have a way to not be killed by a death effect.
Yes.
I will bet my life. Aha, that doesn't work.
Just don't critically fail, because then the wager just treats everyone as if they have lost the wager.
You'll all lose your life. Awakened object lets you awaken an object into an animated object. That's what it does. Then there's a little section also talking about sympathetic magic between two creatures, which such as a possession of a lock of hair. Sympathetic magic is one of the elements that is sort of discussed in thaumaturges in Dark Archive. So bathe in blood, the Bathory spell.
Yes.
It's a rare, illegal in most places ritual where you submerge yourself in alchemically treated blood, and this is going to basically extend your lifespan by making you younger. However, you get a penalty to casting the ritual that increases. And it's untyped, and it goes up every time. And if you ever critically fail, you instantly die. You may come back as a ghost or a vampire. Concealment's Curtain is a divination curse effect where you basically line up a fruit that you have in front of a mirror and chant the name of the target, envision its eyes in your mind, and on midnight of the last day, it's a sympathetic one here where you're going to connect to them, and basically it doesn't make you invisible, but the target can't visually detect you. So true seeing does not help because you're not actually invisible. They just cannot see you.
Oh, very cool.
Because they're cursed that they cannot see you and the other casters.
Dread ambiance is, like those places where you feel like something is off, something is watching you, something doesn't want you there. This is the ritual for making a place that creepy place.
Yes.
sense of dread. So
That's
sometimes
right.
if you're in an eerie place, it's a natural occurrence, and other times somebody casts the
It just
dread ambiance
feels
ritual
bad.
because they wanted their spooky castle to.
It feels bad, and they take a penalty against fear.
Mm-hmm.
And if you use a lot of fear effects, you might want to consider doing this because you only pay 80 gold pieces for a year in a square mile of this penalty.
Mm-hmm.
And so you might as well give the penalty to their saves against fear
Or
effects.
if you
that's
heighten
the
it to
thing that you
9th
do.
level, you could make it cost 5,000 gold pieces and last forever.
Yes. I mean, if you're going to stay in the same place for, like, over, 60 years, then you will save money on making it forever.
if you're like a lich, and
Yeah, you might as well. A lot
yeah.
of liches have fear abilities.
Yeah.
Elemental Sentinel makes a tiny elemental wisp and puts it inside of an object where it's going to try to alert you about things that are going on. Like, its perception is not the greatest, but if something's not... It's gonna try. If something's not hiding, it'll probably notice, and it will report to you.
And it may not and people may not realize that they need to hide because it doesn't seem like there's anyone there.
On a critical failure, it is extremely unhelpful. It's either, like, very low intelligence or it's spiteful to you. And its reports are always misleading. If you heighten it, it can have a better telepathic link and much better perception. Might actually notice things that are trying to sneak too. Guardian of Death. Yes, it's very poisonous. It basically allows you to call all of the poisonous and toxic and venomous snakes and bugs and plants and things from an area to come together. And when you do it, it basically gives you a bonus on checks to deal with the plants and animals too, and feed them and harvest poison from them.
And it creates that poison garden.
Yep. It creates a poison garden for you. Guardian's Aegis is a spell that is used to bind a chosen guardian and ward together. As long as you're on the same plane of existence, you are aware of your relative directions, and when you're within 30 feet of each other, whenever the ward takes damage, it is reduced by an amount equal to half the guardian's level, and the guardian loses an equal number of hit points. And the target still takes all additional effects. So it just, for a week, you are going to have one of your people take half the damage for the other when you're close by. Pretty handy, and it's not that expensive. Ideal Mimicry.
Let's see.
It's a doll. It's your typical thing where you create a doll that is supposed to be the person, and then you can interact with the doll to, like, cause pain in the person who is connected to the doll.
Oh, gotcha. And then, let's see, Mind Swap. You literally allow two subjects to exchange minds, fully inhabiting each other's bodies.
Yep. Normally, you must be of the same ancestry. That way, you don't need to have a 2-page spread like in Pathfinder 1st Edition for possession and mind swaps. That even after the 2-page spread, I remember you were doing one with a Yeti, and you were like, this answers almost all of my questions, but there was still one more.
Yes.
And we tried to answer all of them, and the spread helped compared to not having it in Occult Adventures. But
it did.
If they have to be the same ancestry, then you can still tell the story of, like, being evil and stealing somebody else's body because with the higher level heightened ones that last longer than a week because you, like, I want to become younger by stealing a young person's body, but you don't have to worry about, like, but this body has a million things.
Or I want to steal the body of this influential person and then impersonate them.
At GM's discretion, for a much higher cost, you could change things, and then that's on you, GM, if you want to figure out.
You've already allowed a rare ritual and a caveat of a rare ritual.
Of a much higher cost caveat. Yes. You can figure out what you want to give them because you're doing a bespoke thing. Mystic Carriage.
Well, that carriage looks ominous.
It's mystic, Linda. It's a mystic carriage.
Oh, I see. It looks like more of like a carriage of death, but I see it's not.
Well, I mean, it's mystical.
Yeah.
And its appearance may depend on you and what kind of carriage you want. And it'll carry you on there for a week or 2 weeks on a critical success. And it'll carry you to a location that's mystic carriage. Of course, on a critical failure, you're attacked by a herd of riding horses.
So don't critically fail. I mean, don't critically fail is generally the message of all of these.
Oh, well, I always think you shouldn't critically fail. I mean, come on now. Alright, so the next one after that is Portrait of Spite.
You let's see. Using blood from the target, you create a portrait of them and recite your grievances upon them.
Yep.
And let's see.
And then, basically, you choose clumsy, enfeebled, drained, or stupefied, and their portrait becomes clumsy, enfeebled, drained, or stupefied, and they become clumsy, enfeebled, drained, or stupefied. So, like, the muscles atrophy into nothing, or they pallid and sickly, or whatever it is, they will either become that condition 2 on a successful ritual, or 4 on a critical successful ritual, and it can be halved on a successful will save.
The duration is an entire year.
Yep, that's right.
I mean, Portrait of Spite is a fitting name because you
destroy
have
the
to have a lot
portrait,
of
it will
spite
end the
towards
effect.
someone to spend that much money to curse them with that for a year.
The World's a Stage is a fun one where you basically do a play that indicates what you want to do. And if the person who you are targeting with the thing that you want to do is watching the play, such as if you're saying you're going to overthrow a tyrant by making a play about overthrowing a tyrant, not them, because it's an allegory, but
just an allegory about
it's like, your tyrannous lord, I will put on this play called Down with Tyrants, Down with Ancient Tyrant Guy from 1,000 years ago play. And then it's clearly an allegory, and at that point you actually wind up getting a better effect. So if they're featured, your success becomes a critical success. And so then on a success, you and your buddies can re-roll a single skill check during the time that you're doing the thing.
It says up to 3.
That's a critical success.
Oh, great. And a success. Yeah, sorry. Critical. You're talking about success.
Yes, I'm trying to do it in the way that kind of makes sense to explain, but is not how we can do stat blocks because it would get really confusing.
Yeah, go ahead.
So on a success, you each can reroll 1, and on a critical success, you can reroll 3 because it's the rule of 3. 3 each. And they must be connected to ensuring the topic of the performance comes true. So you can't be like, well, down with the tyrant. Also, I'm going to do this thing where I craft a magic item for me.
Yes, which will eventually be used to fight the tyrant. Yes.
But it's not really the same. Or be like, I'm scribing spells in my spellbook and I want to save money.
Yeah, it gives an example. Give examples of like sneaking past the tyrant's guards or finding the murder weapon or stuff like that.
On a critical failure, fate strikes out at you and you're doomed.
I think this ritual is peak bard.
It is peak bard. That's why it is
an occult ritual.
An occult ritual with performance and crafting as secondary checks. Crafting is for the costumes.
So
that's it.
Our rituals. Next time we'll resume with magic items.
Magic items indeed. So, let's say goodbye to YouTube.
Bye, YouTube.
Bye, YouTube.